All right, so if we go into Photoshop and you click on either your foreground or background color, it doesn't matter which one of these two. So the foreground background color icons that I'm talking about are at the very bottom of the toolbar on the left-hand side. They're not the very, very bottom, but they're those two patches that sort of overlap each other. If you hit your D key, it will default those colors to black and white. If you hit the X key, it will flip them back and forth, so they'll just trade places. And that's true of no matter what color that they ultimately are. If you can't remember the keyboard shortcuts, the incredibly small little icon that's right above it on the left-hand side will also default your foreground and background colors to black and white. And then the little arrow that's just to the right of that will trade them, will flip them back and forth. But the keyboard shortcuts are just simpler and faster to use. So again, the D key will default it to black and white. And it's not always the same. Sometimes white will be your foreground color and black will be your background color, sometimes the opposite, but they will both be, you will have a black and you will have a white. And then the X key again just trades them. So it doesn't matter which one of these you click on. If you just click on one of them, it'll actually just open the color picker. Inside of the color picker, again, we've talked about this a little bit last week. If you click on, right now mine is set to black because black is my foreground color. If white was your foreground color and all of a sudden now you've got white in this space right here, simply click on the space in the R, right next to the R value, type in a 0, hit the tab key, come down, hit a 0, hit the tab key and go down to the blue and hit a 0. Again, equal amounts of RGB equal gray. Black is a gray. White is also a gray. To then see what we need to talk about when we're thinking about the range of possible reds, if you click on the radio button right next to the R, the column becomes whatever radio button you click. So for instance, if you come up to the color, the way color is described in HSB, which stands for hue, saturation, brightness. We're going to look at that in just a second. But if you go to click on the radio button right next to the H, you'll see your column becomes hues. And if you were to click on the S button, this is now saturation. The B button, this is now brightness. But in our case, we want to view the RGB values. So again, if you click on the radio button next to the R, the column becomes all of the values for R that you have. And you can see there's two little arrows at the very bottom of this column. If you click on those arrows and start to drag them up, you'll notice that the value for R is the only thing that changes in the RGB setup. Other things in the HSB and in the LAB, those change as well, also in the CMYK. I'm not looking at that. I'm strictly looking at the R value. And if you drag it all the way up to the very top, you'll see that you get an R value of 255. So what this tells us is that the range of reds that we have, pure reds, there is no green and there's no blue in any of these right now. The way this is set up, it's just the reds. We have 255 of them. So again, 255, red is the purest, most intense, saturated, brightest red that you can get. If you drag it down into the middle, somewhere around 128 for your R value, that would be exactly in the middle. You can see that you have it's still a pure red. It's still a fully saturated red, but its brightness has actually been changed. It's only half of its brightness. And if you pull it all the way down, it's the same deal. It's still a pure red. It's in this case, it's lost all its saturation because since you've pulled it all down and it is a black, black is a gray. Gray is an unsaturated color. Gray has no saturation. So at any rate, you have 256 reds. If you click on the green radio button now, you have 256 greens. And if you click on the blue radio button now, you have 256 blues. Again, it only goes up to 255, but remember, 0 is one of those values. So it's 0 plus the 255 equals 256 possible values for that. So then going back to our color theory lecture part, we just took a look at all of that. You can actually map this in space. I'm going to not run this so that I've got a mouse that I can actually show you guys move around so that you can see it. So I'm not going to run this as a presentation. But what we can do is when we were trying to describe color, we have three values now. We have a red, green, and blue. If you try to graph those, if you were to stay in a two-dimensional graph, something that was on just a flat piece of paper, you could only do two of the three. You could not do all three. If you want to do all three, you end up creating a three-dimensional space. So if you take a look at this three-dimensional space, at this lower corner, it's a cube. And we are looking at the lower underside of the cube. And in this lower corner right here is where all three of those blacks meet. It's where you have 0 red, 0 green, 0 blue. Now, if you come along this axis, we're not going up high and we're not traveling in this direction at all, but just along this one axis right here, up to this corner right here, you have 255 red. This is where your pure red is. So that column that we've been pushing up and down with red, that column is sitting right here. It starts at 0 right here, goes up to 255. Now, in the same way, the green also starts in this corner, 0 green, but now the green moves in this direction. It's going from the bottom of the cube to the top. And then finally, the blue also starts with 0 right here, but it moves in this direction going forward. These three axes describe a three-dimensional space. And you can use any combination of these values to establish any color of RGB that's in the rainbow. So if we then flip this cube to look at it from the other side, so I'm now looking at it from the bottom in the back, I'm going to call it the back. It will be the back of this. I've now flipped the cube around. That black space, that black corner is the far back corner that we cannot see right now. But on the opposite side, what we've got is, remember, this is your pure red right here. This is your pure green right here at this corner. And then this is your pure blue right here. If you do all of those at their maximum intensity, so all of those values at 255, you will see that you come all the way out here, you come all the way out here, and then you come all the way up to the top. And it's this spot right up here. 255, 255, 255 is white. And that's why this little corner right up here is white. So again, if we go back and take a look in Photoshop, and you grab, we'll actually do it by dragging them. I'm gonna click on the red. I'm gonna drag its slider all the way up. I'm gonna click on the green, and I'm gonna drag that slider all the way up. And you can see now you have a secondary color. This is yellow, because when you combine red and green together, they equal yellow. And again, this is at the maximum intensity. And then finally, if you click on the blue and add that, you end up with equal amounts of RGB at their maximum intensity, which is white. And that is what is happening right here at this spot. This is white. So this is a three-dimensional space. That's why we talk about color in space. All of the colors of the rainbow are somewhere in this space. So where would middle gray actually be in this cube?
Like the center?
The very center is where middle gray would be. It's exactly right. So where is all the green axis go from, though? So if remember where black is in the very back, and now we've got white up here. So all of the grays go from that space, that black space in the back, all the way up through the center to this corner right up here. So it bisects it through there. Right in the very middle is where middle gray is. As you get closer up here to the white, you get into your lighter grays. As you get further down, deeper into that, on that one single line is where all your neutral grays are. So if we then take a look at the next slide of this, the reason they did this is that they were trying, the people who invented this, it was a consortium that met in Paris in the 1930s called the CIE. They were the ones who came up with this method, and what they were trying to do was come up with a way that you could define color. And define color in such a way that you could communicate color to anyone, and that whatever you communicated to them, they would end up with the exact same color that you were trying to communicate to them. And the thing is that labels never work. You can't say, oh yeah, I want a kind of a light cyan or a sort of a greenish blue or something like that. Those things are meaningless. they needed a way to quantify this. And so what they said was the best way that they could do it is they were going to create this space. So they created this space. Now, we have a lot of color spaces that we work with. Adobe RGB is a color space. sRGB is a color space. In this case, this is an RGB color space, but they are all physical dimensional spaces. And so what they said was, instead of putting these meaningless labels on this, what we are going to do is we are going to define a point somewhere in this space, and that point will represent that color. And as a consequence, anybody who had this space and who had the coordinates of where that color was located in this space could actually come up with the exact identical color that was trying to be communicated to them. So if you think of this space like the universe, the Earth is in one place in the universe. So if you can come, doesn't matter where you are in the universe, if you can come up with the coordinates that say, this is where this Earth is in space, in this whole giant space, this is where it's located, then everybody will understand the Earth is as the Earth. So that's the whole trick of this. These coordinates right here, this 51, this 153, and this 204, it's not amounts of color per se. It's the three coordinates that you need to define this space right here. And this space right here, based on these coordinates, will be the same color for every single person in this room, for every single person in the world, as long as they are using the same color system. Does that make sense, everybody? What's going on here? Okay. However, as good as this system is, one of the liabilities that we run into, and you can see it, if you go back to our color picker right here, back in the color picker part, I'm going to drag one of these down. I'm going to actually drag two of these down so that I've only got the, I'll leave the green all the way up. What you can see is also happening here is as I run along my scale of greens, I'm not only changing the value, but I'm changing the tone, the luminosity. As I run down this scale, my green gets darker. So when we use color correction curves in Photoshop in RGB, the problem that you run into is you can change the color, but you inevitably change the luminosity as well. The luminosity is the brightness. Those two are interconnected with one another, and that makes it really problematic because you are not changing a single variable, you're changing two variables at the same time. You're changing the color, but you're also changing the luminosity. And in general, you guys know this. So if we were, for instance, I need everybody to open up that red car again for me, if you will. For most of you, if you haven't done a lot of work in Photoshop, if you simply come up to the File menu down to Open Recent, it should be pretty much in this recent part. It's just a fast way to get to it. I can put a color correction curve on this. So if I come over to my little icons at the very bottom of my layers palette, all the adjustment layers are in the icon that is, it looks like a circle that's half black and half white. If you click on that, you'll get a flyout menu, and you're just going to add a conventional regular curve to this. When you do that, you have an RGB curve in the drop-down menu, so I'm now looking up at my properties panel. If I click on that, I can come down and I can pick just the red channel. And I say, okay, I'm just going to pick the red channel. That's all I want to do. So if I come into the middle of this red channel and I click a point in the middle and drag to the lower corner, you can see what I'm doing is I'm actually adding the opposite of red, which is cyan. That's what I'm adding to this car. But you can also see the car is getting darker. It's doing both things. If I go in the opposite direction to add the red, I'm also adding red, but look at how much brighter the car is getting as well. The whole scene gets brighter. That is because in an RGB system, luminosity and color are connected. They are mixed. They are integrated. When you change one, you change both. You can't avoid that part. You can if you use blending modes, but that's a different story. We'll get to that for a later conversation. So the very smart people in Paris figured out, well, there's got to be a better way of doing this, and I'm going to show you the way they actually chose to do it. So if we go back, first off, we need to start with hue. What is hue? I'm going to go ahead and run this now so you don't just read it. Yes? In the video, it talked about spectral data. In the reading, it does. So another problem that you get into this, and again, it's all about location. So when we talk about spectral readings, I'm going to pause the video here because you're not going to hear me. We need to go back on the board and look at this. So hang on just 1 second. So back to my question, what is hue? So hue, it's the property that distinguishes one color from another. So when we say red or green or cyan or yellow blue or those kinds of things, whatever, what we're talking about is the property that we describe or that we define as hue. So if you take a look at these 7 little patches that are running along the bottom, they actually happen to be red, green, and blue, and then cyan, magenta, yellow, and then an orange, just because you can put, it's not only the primaries. But it's defined by the location on the color wheel. We'll take a look at a color wheel in just a second. These 7 patches are all the exact same saturation. They are all the exact same brightness. The only thing that is changing here is the hue. So then what is saturation? Come on, you guys can do a guess. The amount of gray in it? That's actually one way of looking at it, yes. So the less saturated something is, the more it's moving towards gray. The greater the saturation something is, the further away. So a lot of people would refer to it as the purity of color. So at one extreme, you have a pure color. So if you look at the patch that's on the far left, this is a pure red. As you start to actually add its complementary color, you start moving to the point where when they finally equal each other in amount. So if you have two complementary colors and you mix them together in exactly the same amount, you will end up with a neutral gray. So in this case still, it's controlled by adding or subtracting its complementary color. Saturation is defined on a scale of 0 to 100. We need to go back really quickly because I want to talk about the scale of hue. So this matters. So hue, when we talked about it on the location, on the color wheel, whatever, hue is defined in degrees. So if you think about we'll look at one in just a second. But if you think about a circle, there's 360 degrees in a circle, right? By definition, the way that the standards, the same people who did this in Paris in 1931 established it, is in that circle, if you go right at 3 o'clock, that's where 0 degrees is, and by definition, that's red. And then we will take a look. So hue is defined by its degree around that circle. Then when we get to saturation, again, saturation is on a scale of 0 to 100%. So 0 would be that there is no longer a distinguishable color. It is now grayed out, whereas 100% would be a pure red or a pure green or a pure cyan or a pure whatever. So, these patches are all the exact same color, all the exact same brightness. The only thing that is changing in these is the saturation. This is the color wheel. And again, by definition, this is how it starts. And this shows up into Photoshop. So we have red right here at 3 o'clock at 0 degrees. The other major primaries have to be as far away from this red as they can be, but no closer to the other primary. So it means that you divide the 360 by 3, and you come up with 120. So green is at 120 degrees off of red. So is blue. It's either negative 120 degrees off or 240 if you go all the way around. So complementary colors are directly across, so 180 degrees from each other. again, 180 degrees. If I'm standing here looking at you and say I'm going to turn 180 degrees, I just got my back to you now. So is this making sense to everybody? So complementary colors are always directly across from one another. So if you add equal amounts of cyan to red, right here in the middle, you end up with neutral gray, if they are in the exact same amounts. So this matters because what it now shows you is the hue is going around this, but saturation is distance from the center out. The more saturated something is, the closer it is. All the most saturated colors are at the very edge of this color wheel. As you start to move into the center of the color wheel, you lose saturation to the point that in the very center you have your color is completely desaturated. It does not have a color to it anymore. Does this make sense, everyone? So in this case, what we've got here is this is the two-dimensional space. This is the problem that we've run into with when we were thinking about color as a three-dimensional space. In this case, it's only two-dimensional. So here, RGBs are 120 degrees from each other. CMYK primaries are the ones that are in between where they're mixed. Again, in this case, green and blue make cyan. It's an additive system here. Magenta and yellow make red, which is a subtractive system. So complementary colors are opposite to each other. We just talked about that. Equal amounts of complementary color always make gray. We talked about that. Gray center is a neutral gray. Saturation is at the greatest edges here. This is really critical to how we work with color when we're trying to translate from screen to print. But brightness is missing. You don't see any white in here, and you don't see any black in here. Again, this is only two-dimensional. So brightness. What is brightness? It's the one that most of you guys struggle with the hardest, is to define it or to think about it. So brightness is the property by which the color appears to contain more or less light. Brightness is defined on a scale of 0 to 100. 0 is no brightness at all. 100 is maximum brightness. Every possible color appears black if its brightness is set to 0. It does not matter. These 7 patches, all of these are the exact same hue. They are the exact same saturation. The only thing here that is changing is the brightness. So if we look on the far left-hand side, it's a pure red, but by the time you by the time you drop its brightness down to 0, it becomes black. So this is how they deal with that. They take the color wheel, which we were looking at just earlier. They take this thing right here, the color wheel, two-dimensional, and they drop it flat, horizontal, like a record LP or like a pan on a. So anyway, it's dropped flat. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to mumble through to get to you guys. So what they do is they actually drop this thing flat, and then they add the third dimension. So we've now got brightness. So again, hue is around the edges of this. Saturation is from the center out. This is that two-dimensional disc. They've flattened it, and then they've added a third dimension, brightness that goes up to the top and down to the bottom. So you can see as you go up here, you get lighter and lighter and lighter, and as you go down here, you get darker and darker and darker. So again, we now have a three-dimensional color space that is not based on RGB. This is now based on HSB. And there's a major advantage to this. We're going to look at that in just a second. So it is a three-dimensional space. To this, it's laid horizontally. It's exactly what I just explained to you guys in terms of how it's oriented. Hue goes around the equator. Red is always at 0, starts at 0. Saturation is the distance from the center out. Brightness is the whole sort of north-south axis. I a lot of times think of this sort of like the globe or like the Earth would actually be, kind of. And then as color gets lighter or darker, it becomes less saturated. So a lot of people think, well, why isn't this just a cylinder? Why isn't this just a straight up and down cylinder? And the truth of it is that as you get brighter, you lose saturation. So it comes in. The reason you're getting this cone shaped on this is as this image gets brighter, you lose saturation all the way up to the very tip top here, which is white. And by the time you reach white, you have 0 saturation. It is a neutral gray. And the same thing happens as you go down to the bottom. As things get darker and darker and darker, they get less saturated. And by the time you get all the way down here to the very bottom point, it is black. Black is completely desaturated. It is a neutral gray. So that's why this thing gets shaped this way. HSB cannot be measured. It's actually calculated from RGB. So this is created from RGB, but it in this part doesn't necessarily matter all that much. This is what a true model looks like. So this is a model that was created by a man named Munsell. He was the one who was a real pioneer of color. You guys may have heard of him, really famous, but at any rate, this is a cutaway of a Munsell model, and you can see this is supposed to be a three-dimensional world. There's a cutout of this that they've removed out of this so that you can see into the center. And so what you can see here is that going from the bottom in the very center all the way to the top, we go from black to white, but all of these values that are going up through the very center here are all neutral grays. They're just getting brighter. Does this make sense, everyone? So in terms of the going around the outside, again, we've got hue is going around the outside. So these would be the reds moving into the yellows, moving into the greens, moving into the cyans, moving into the blues, and on. Again, the cutout that exists here is you're missing the magentas in there. But so that's where hue is. And then you can see as you move from the column in here, which is the center column, which is completely neutral gray, as you start to move out towards the edges of this, it gets more and more and more and more and more saturated until you get out to here at the very end, which is its greatest saturation. Are we good on this part? Right? Okay, this thing, but look at how misshapen this whole thing is. Wouldn't you think it would be like a perfect globe? Why isn't it? Shouldn't it be just a perfect sphere? It's not. Why? No, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going on based on the last model you showed. It's all connected together.
Yeah.
So you change one, change all three.
No, you don't. That's the value. That's the whole important issue of this is that I can go in now and change a single one of these variables and the others don't change. That's the trick. That's why we're going to HSB. Remember, in RGB, tone and color are connected. In HSB, they're not. So anyway, the reason this thing is all misshapen is that different colors can saturate greater than other colors. So for instance, you can get over into here and the sort of like cyans and over in here. They don't saturate anywhere near as much as the reds do over in here. The yellows actually saturate quite a bit more than the magenta parts that are missing in here. The blues are somewhat deficient, but at any rate, that's why this thing is misshapen. It's not this perfect thing because colors saturate at different levels. You can get more saturated of certain colors than you can of others. Make sense? All right. For the people who are on Windows, you can't do this, but for the people who aren't, for the Macintosh people, I need you to go to, do this with me, please. You'll find this is really fun. When you go home tonight, you can get all really stoned and fucked up and put on some, I don't know, trippy music and then go and do exactly what I'm going to show you to right now. So if you go to your application folder, at the bottom of your application folder is a utilities folder. If you click on your utilities folder, inside there is a Color Sync utility app. If you launch that, when it first opens up, you'll have a set of, your screen may look different than mine, don't worry about it, I'll get you to the same place. There's a set of 5 tabs that go along the very top. The first one is Profile First Aid. The second one is Profiles. That's the one that I want you to select as Profiles. Then on the left-hand side, you'll have a Profile drop-down menu set. Yours will probably look different than mine. I've got some profiles that you may not have. But if you open up the little drop-down menu next to System, Adobe loads its profiles into the system. So inside there is going to be an Adobe RGB. If you click on that, you will then get this opened up screen that's got a crosshairs in it and a little hand that you can put in the middle. You can actually grab this and move this thing around in space. This is what the Adobe RGB color space looks like. Now again, we are only looking at the color that's on the very outside edges of this. We do have the white X's at the top. This represents white up here. We do have black X at the bottom. This represents black right there. But you can see this thing is even weirder shape than the thing that we were looking at before, the Munsell space here. But this is the true Adobe Color RGB color space. This is actually what it looks like. And so you can see in this case what they are doing is they are now separating brightness, which exists just in that middle variable. If you change the brightness, that's all you're doing is you're making things brighter or darker. You can change the hue, but when you change the hue, you're not changing the brightness or the saturation. And then you can change the saturation without changing any of the others. It divorces tone, it divorces luminosity from color. That is also what LEB does. That was the trick I played last week when we changed the car to green. The reason the car didn't get darker when we actually shifted it from red to green was because in an LAB space, luminosity is separate from color. So if we go back into, you should know, this is a great place that you can actually see certain things to help you decide why you shouldn't be working in sRGB and why you should be working in Adobe RGB. So if you're in here and you've got this selected, come up to the upper left-hand corner. There's a little arrow point down. If you click on this little arrow that points down, you can come down and say, I want you to hold this for comparison. And this will then gray out. It kind of ghosts itself out. And then you can click on sRGB, and it will show up inside that grayed out part. So this shows you the mismatch. The gray area right in here is all Adobe RGB color that you have available to you. This sRGB is a much smaller color space. So this is, again, the settings that we set up last week when we did our color editor settings. By default, Adobe ships Photoshop with this smaller sRGB as the default space, and then doesn't warn you when you bring in your camera data, which is even larger than the Adobe RGB space. It doesn't tell you that it's going to crush your color down to that little ass space, and the minute you save your file, all of the color, all of this color that is in all this grayed out part, all of that additional color is just thrown away. Yeah. Tragic. Catastrophic. It gets worse. If we go to that same little triangle and do a clear comparison, then we're going to actually try to find ProPhoto RGB. They don't typically put it up in the top, but this is where I was talking to you about. I can find mine. If you look in the others, it'll be in one of the other sort of like libraries. You should be able to find it. Huh. I've always had this. But I don't see it right now. I'll find it and load it for you and show you the difference. But this shift in these two extremes is even more radical when you actually start looking at ProPhoto RGB and how big it is relative to the color spaces that we actually work in. But at any rate, back to our color lecture really quickly. We're almost there. So I need everybody to go into Photoshop again. You can close up the car. We don't need it. You don't need to save it. I do want you to click on the color picker again. And now we can actually look. And so if you cannot remember what HSB stands for, this is the perfect place to go, because when you open up the color picker, we have HSB. We can control color in HSB right here. So if you click on the, I'm starting with black, so I've got 000, but if you click on the radio button to show hue, so this is going to be H, and it's zeroed out. Remember, by definition, 0 degrees is red. So if we then take our saturation and boost it all the way up. So right now it's at 0. I'm going to crank it all the way up. This is, you don't see a change because it's still black. And then I'm going to click on my brightness and I'm going to bring it all the way up. Then when we go back to hue and you click on it, as we run up and down this column, you will see what hue is. It changes, but look at the saturation and the brightness. These values are not changing at all. No matter what hue I pick, these things are completely separate from one another. If I pick 180 degrees, type it in, I get cyan, because cyan is the exact opposite of red. So again, 180 degrees difference from 0, red is 0, would be cyan. If we put in 120 degrees, we get green. If we put in 240 degrees, we get blue. It's just that simple. I'm going to go back to 0 again. Actually, it's not only 0, but it's 360. 360 and 0 are the same mark. They are both by definition red. I don't know if you can type in a 360 here. I'll see. Yeah, well, it gets me back to red. Now I'm going to click on the saturation slider button, and you can see on the saturation slider button, as I start to pull this down, it starts to lose its intensity. And as I continue to bring it down, it comes all the way down to white. Why didn't this go to gray? I just completely desaturated it. What?
Because your brightness is still at 100?
Exactly. The thing is, it is a gray, but because my brightness is at 100, it's white. If you want it to be middle gray, you take your brightness down to 50%. So you just click on your brightness, bring it down or type it in to 50%, and this is where you've got middle gray. But you can see in doing this, now I'm only changing one variable. I'm not changing anything else. Nothing else changes. If we go back to full red, so go ahead and crank the brightness all the way back up again, crank the saturation all the way back up again, and then take a look at your RGB value. Again, we're going to click on this RGB value. So when I was moving the hue saturation part, the only variable that was moving was 1. That was it. But look what happens when I actually grab and change the red. Look at the saturation and brightness sliders in my HSB. And as I start to pull these down, it actually starts to change the brightness in here, and eventually it should change the saturation. Yeah, and then the saturation just drops out. So at any rate, the point being is in HSB, we divorce color from luminosity. Everything that is done in Photoshop is done in something similar to an HSB space. Even though we use curves that are RGB, those are simulated. The real work underneath the hood is all being done in HSB. It's actually all being done in LAB, which we're going to look at right now. It's very similar to HSB. Okay, almost done, guys, I swear. This part's important. So this is LAB. So I'm going to go ahead and run this part. So in the LAB color system here, it looks very much like HSB. I've got two axes that go out here that describe my color. So this is the color wheel. It's been flopped. And then I've got brightness that actually starts with black down here and goes up to white up in here. The difference in LAB is what happens is that the two axes that actually describe color that go in here, they are neutralized in the very middle. So these work on a slightly different scale. So what you'll see is that luminosity is the same. Luminosity goes from 0 at the bottom up to 100 at the very top. But the magenta green axis, which is the A axis, let me jump out of here so I have a cursor. It's this green magenta axis. What it does is it starts at a positive 127. That's this point right here called magenta. Some people call it red. It's actually neither magenta nor red. So some people will, that's just the way this diagram was written. This is a positive 127. 0 is in the middle, and then this is a negative 128. It still gives us that 256 colors that run, hues that run along the axis from the A-axis from magenta to green. And then the same thing holds true for yellow. So in this case, yellow is a positive 127, and it goes to blue over here, which is a negative 128. So gray is sitting in the middle for both. Again, if you go back and take a look at your color picker, and we put in a certain value here, so I'm going to click on the red and crank it all the way up to a full red. You can actually see in this full red that I've got a luminosity of 63, so it's sort of in the mid-range. My A channel right here, which again is the distance from, is the axis that goes from green to magenta, it's a positive 1, and then I've got, again, a blue, so it's not a pure red. I've got a positive value in the blue. But if I go to, say, like a green or a yellow and crank this up, you can see I start getting into negative values in here. This is a negative 16. So you have positive, negative values in there because the center, which is always neutral color, is labeled as 0. This is the system that Photoshop actually works on. So I would say to you all, let me see if, yeah, we've actually already done that part. How many people in here are familiar with working in LAB? I need everyone in here to open up a raw file. So if we go to our class folder for today, so week number 2, in your student class folders, inside here there is a folder that is 20107. The folder ends in woods_07. If you open this up, inside here, I want you to just open a raw file. So I've got D&G files in here. If you've got D&Gs, don't open those. I'm just looking for a CR2 file. So this very first one, it's shot number 07, frame 001, .cr2. If you can open that in Photoshop really quickly. Does everybody have this open in Photoshop? Yes.
I got lost on where you got it.
Okay, so go to the files that you copied last week to week number 2, or session number 2, or student files number 2. Yeah, student files week 02. Got that? Inside that, there's another folder that ends in Woods 07. Just open that. And then it's the file that's frame number 001 at the end. Open that up in Photoshop. So does everybody have this thing opened up in Photoshop? Everybody? Okay. So up at the very top of the control panels that are on the left-hand side, at the very top we have light, and you should have exposure, correct? This, brightness. This is the L of LAB. Then look at your color down here. You have temperature and tint. Temperature is the blue-yellow axis. That is the B of LAB. If you go underneath it, tint, that's the magenta-green axis. That's the A axis of LAB. You guys have been working in LAB for years. They just never called it that. But think about this. When you change the exposure in here, you do not change the color of this image. If you do that in Photoshop, in RGB, you do. In here, if you change the tint or the temperature again, if you change either one or both of those, the coloring, the luminosity of this does not change. That is just a massive, massive leap forward in being able to deal with color. Questions about this? Okay. I think it's a good time for a break. So I got 2 o'clock. Let's make it a hard 10. Be back here at 10 after 2, and we'll actually start working on some other stuff. So moving on, there's one last thing that I want to talk about. It's really more color managed workflow. It's not so much about the nitty gritty color part right here, but it's only 3 or 4 slides long. So bear with me. Okay, so color managed workflow, the way that we are going to work in this class, the solution to all the problems that you guys have had in doing your work, especially if you're doing any kind of printing, that sort of stuff. How many of you guys, I think I've asked this question before, but I'll ask it again anyway. How many of you guys pull test prints when you're actually printing? And you pull a test print and you look at it and you say, okay, it looks a little too red, so I'm going to knock the red back or something like that, right? I don't ever pull test prints. I haven't pulled a test print in 35 years because I follow this method. So we're going to start out with the problem and the solution for color and color across different devices that you ultimately work with. Everything from your camera to your monitor to your printer, all of those and everything in between, we've got to address. We've got to get them on the same page so that they are seeing and describing the exact same color. So I'm going to start out with this. This is a file. So I've got a Photoshop file, and it's calling for a specific color. And this is the color. This is the location of the color. It is a 255 red, 148 green, and a 21 blue. So that is what's in the file. And that's what I want everywhere. I want it to print out that color. I want to see that color in my monitor. This is the color that is actually in my file. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So then I actually put it up on an uncalibrated monitor, and that color that's on my monitor is what I get. And you can take a look at the two of them, and you can see they're nowhere near the same thing. So when you actually measure that thing, so you can take a piece of hardware, it looks like this. It's actually a spectrometer. These are spectrometers. It looks like this. Some of you have seen one of these and used one of these. Everyone's going to use this in the next 3 weeks. You put this right on your screen and it measures what that color really is. And it can tell you, and it comes back and it says, well, okay, the red at 255, it's the same. There's not a problem there. But look at the difference in the green. That color on the screen is a 248, not a 148. That's a huge problem. And then down here in the blue, it's actually showing on my screen, it's showing as a 53 blue, but the file says, well, I want a 21 blue. There's a clear mismatch here. And this is the fundamental problem that you guys have in doing color correction. You are trying to color correct on an uncalibrated monitor, and the monitor is just lying to you. It's throwing you these numbers. It's not showing you exactly what your file is asking for. So then you print your file out, and you actually get this weird color, or you get the, whatever, you get the mismatch. So the way to get around this is you profile your monitor. So what happens is, the profiling process, it's a combination of software and hardware. So there's a software that I had given you guys. Hopefully you installed all of that software that I gave you last week. So you've already got the software on your computer that you need. You run the software and you use this puck or one like it. We've got a bunch of them around here. So you use this puck, you put it onto your screen, and the hardware speaks to the software speaks to the hardware. So what happens is the software starts putting up colors, and the software knows what the colors are. The hardware measures the color and says, okay, well, you're not even close here. You need to do this, whatever. But the software then will build a table that corrects for the difference in the file and what your computer monitor is actually showing you. Does that make sense? So, once you go through the software and have a calibrated monitor, then this is the result. It ends up being that the profile in here understood what needed to be done to modify the screen to show you this exact color. So you can see in the red channel at the very top, the file asked for a 255 red. The monitor showed them that, so there was no problem. So the profile is not doing any correction at all, and you still have 255 red. But in the green, the file wanted 148. The monitor said, okay, I'm going to give you 248. The profile understands that you need to subtract 100 green when this is called for in order to give you the same 148. And then the final thing in the blue, same deal. The file's calling for 21, the monitor's showing 53. It knows, the profile knows you need to knock 32 off of that call, off of what's being shown to actually get this to be the original color. So you can see the file now, the numbers that the file is asking for, the monitor is now showing. And that is color managed workflow. Make sense? So, this is ultimately how it works. This is the workflow that we are going to embrace and that you should be using for the whole rest of your life. We're going to start with the camera profile. You can actually profile your cameras, and you should. But you can also do this with scanners. So this would be your initial input device, right? I'm either scanning something or I'm shooting a picture of it with my camera. So cameras have bias in them. All of them do, and you need to remove that bias. That same thing that I just showed you, the problem with the monitor, that actually happens with your camera as well. So your camera records color, but the color that it records is uncalibrated, and we need to calibrate it to make sure that the color that comes off of your sensor in your camera is unambiguous color, not something that's being skewed by that sensor. So, this whole chain of command that we do here, we start with a camera. You have a camera profile that does that correction. Then this comes into the input software. So this would be Camera Raw or Lightroom, whatever. Then this is actually brought into Photoshop, and these are working spaces in Photoshop. This is Adobe RGB, ProPhoto RGB, sRGB. The advantage of this is that Adobe RGB, sRGB, ProPhoto RGB, all of those are mathematical spaces. They are not physical. The spaces that come off of your camera, those really are physical, mappable spaces. But the ones that are inside of Photoshop, again, Adobe RGB, ProPhoto, all of those are mathematical spaces. And the reason that works for us is that you can take, if you've corrected any sort of input at all, you can bring it into here. It is unambiguous in this space, and then you can send it out to a monitor through a profile to correct for it, or to correct the monitor, or out to a printer to correct for it, or out to a film scanner to correct for it, or whatever output that you actually do. This is an exchange space that's only in, again, it's mathematical, and everybody's is the same. My Adobe Photoshop is identical to yours. So that's why we are getting rid of the bias of a camera, the bias of a monitor, and the bias of a printer. We are removing all of those by using profiles. Questions about this? Is this process making sense? Okay. Color temperature. Anybody have any idea what this is? We talk about it some. So, color temperature, it actually is the B-axis of the LAB scale. The tint that we work with in Lightroom or in Photoshop, in a Camera Raw, whatever, is the A-axis in LAB. And then luminosity is all on its own. It's got nothing to do with color. But the way color temperature came about was, there was, if you think about it, there are two temperature scales that you guys are pretty much aware of. There's Fahrenheit and centigrade, right? In Fahrenheit, water freezes at 32. In centigrade, it freezes at 0. In Fahrenheit, water boils at 212, boils at 100 degrees in centigrade. They're just scales. That's all they are. But if you think about water, what happens with water? Water is made up of molecules. And as you start to add energy to those molecules, they just move around, and they bang into each other, and they just move around. The way a microwave works is that a microwave actually excites those molecules so they bang against each other really hard. and fast, and that generates heat, and that's how a microwave works. But if you go in the other direction, if you actually start to cool them down, the movement of the molecules slows down, and it slows down, and it slows down. And eventually you get to ice, and they're still moving in ice, but they're moving very slow compared to if water was boiling. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so there was this guy named Kelvin, and he said, well, okay, what would happen if you just removed all the energy? You took all the energy out of something, and the molecules stopped. That's a finite place. Once you remove all the energy and the molecules are no longer moving at all, he called that 0 degrees Kelvin. But because you have no energy in that, it's as black can be. There is no energy. There's no blacker space in the world. They call this a black body. And then what Kelvin decided to do is he was going to start to add energy. And as he started to add energy, then the molecules did start to move. And once he got up to about 2,700 degrees on his Kelvin scale, those molecules are moving pretty good, and the black body is now glowing. And it glows at roughly the color temperature of a tungsten light. So most of you know that 2,700 degrees Kelvin is a tungsten light. Is that correct? Anybody not know that? Anybody just checking out, watching their Instagram feed? No. At 3,200 degrees is what we would use for what we call photo lights. So they're hot lights in photography. So like the mole lights, the Smith Victors, all of those are around 3,200 degrees Kelvin. So if you continue on that scale and you go way up and you really are putting in a lot of energy right now, the light actually goes from that orangish to bluish. So if you are on the top of Mount Everest on a completely clear blue day at noon, the color temperature of Mount Everest is about 9,000 degrees Kelvin. So again, this low down here, 25, 26, 27 would be tungsten light. This like 32 right in here would be roughly the color of a Smith Victor or a Mole Richardson light. This area right up in here, and this 9,000, this blue up in here, would be roughly Mount Everest on a really bright sunny day. Day with clear blue sky, all snow. But you'll see we've got blue on one side and we've got orange on the other side. And somewhere right here in the middle, they cancel each other out, and they are completely neutral. They are color cast free. And that happens right at 6,500 degrees Kelvin. So when we get into doing our calibration of our monitors and all that, you don't want your monitor to have a color cast to it. So you calibrate it to 6,500 degrees Kelvin. You will see this when you go through the whole calibration software for your monitor. And this is all determined by color temperature here. Does that make sense? All right. We're done with color. Well, color theory anyway. Okay, so for the monitor calibration part, you guys are going to have to do it yourselves because this actually takes some time. It's not a ton of time, but I don't want to take the time out in class, and you can't see it in class anyway. So when I calibrate my monitor here, this is a separate monitor, the projector right here, so you don't see anything that'll actually happen on this screen. During our break, I'm going to pause the video. I will unplug my computer and I will show you guys a before and after calibration on my computer. The newer Macintoshes have gotten a little bit more complicated in terms of how to calibrate them. The newer Windows laptops have not gotten more complicated, but they have gotten much more stable. So you guys are all in a good, sort of a good place to go. If you go to our website, can you tell what I'm thinking? And we go to our session number 2. in our session number 2, we are going to do this in class, this in class, this in class, this in class, this. Calibrate your monitor. So you need to follow a set of videos to actually do your calibration. It'll take way too long for us to do it in class. So you need to it's really specific depending on the computer that you have. If you're not sure which kind that you have, you just tap me during the break or at the end of class, whatever, and we will look at it. But for most of you are working with new Apple silicone. The M1 chip was the first of the Apple silicones. They don't fall into this category, but everyone else does. So if you've bought Apple in the last 3 or 4 years, you are going to use this setup right here. So there is a video that it's just on YouTube. Click and watch this video and follow the steps in this. This is actually sets up the settings that you need. A lot of the stuff that we do, computers are set to do to try to make your color better. Like for instance, if you actually look in Apple's really quickly here, I'm just going to go to settings for Apple right here. And if we look at display, they have things like this True Tone, automatically adapt display to make colors appear consistent in different ambient lighting conditions. Well, what you're telling your computer is to completely change the color of your computer all day long, every day. That's not color calibrated workspace. You need to lock that color down. You cannot have shit like this on. Apple also does transparency in their displays where you can see under other windows. That actually mixes color. You can't have that happening either. So there's a huge number of settings that you have to actually do before you do the calibration. And then this video is the actual calibration video. It'll walk you through the steps, every single step. So watch the video on your phone while you're doing it on your screen, because you can't have your screen changing. You can't be watching a video on your screen while you're actually calibrating it. The software that calibrates this will take your screen over and it will just start flashing colors up on your screen, and you use this hardware puck to actually do the measurement part. You get these from the media center. They will actually let you take them home so you can take these out. If you really sit down and do this, you can actually bang this out in under a half hour. You can probably do it in about 20 minutes and use this and then just give it back to them. But that's what you're going to use. Again, the new Apple silicone people, that's what you would use following these 2 videos. For the Windows people, it's the same puck. You get it at the same place, but you have a different set of windows of steps that you need to go through. The first will be the settings and the second will be that part. If, on the other hand, yeah. So this is just going to tell you how you can actually, once you get through the whole step of doing a profile, I just want you to do a screenshot showing that you've got a custom-made profile that's actually working on your monitor. This will walk you through all of the steps on how to do it. These videos are incredibly well done. It's like the ultimate color guru of all time is who presents these things. So this is what I need you guys to actually do. There's another place that you can find this stuff. If you go into your your week number 2 folder, so that's where I am at right now in my week number 2, under monitor calibration, under the Macintosh part right here, this will walk you through the same thing. It's the same links to the same it's the same videos, YouTube videos that are actually on our Canvas site. This is another copy of the software. For the Macintosh that do not work with Calibrate, so if you take a look at this, if you have an Intel Mac, which is pretty old now, it's the last one that they did, I think, was in 2019. That's a 7-year-old computer. You use a different puck and different software. And then also, if you have a MacBook Air, the M series chip only, but I think it's just the M1 series, you may have to use a different software. It's also a different puck. Again, the Media Center has the older puck. It's an older software and an older puck. If you have any trouble doing this, just let me know. I will help you get you through this. If we have to meet outside of class and work on these, that's fine. I have no problem doing that. You've got, I think, This says it's due February 10th, which is a week from now. I'm going to change that right now. You have until the 24th to do this. You've got 3 weeks to do this. You cannot work without a calibrated monitor. This is not an option. If you try to do this, you're simply guessing at your work, and then you're trying to make corrections on the wrong end. You go in, and because your monitor lies to you, you don't believe the file, and so you start making changes to the file to make your print look good, whereas the whole issue, the whole time, is the monitor. Are we good on that part? Questions? Yes?
Are the computers in there fully calibrated?
They are, and they're calibrated every week. So you can trust the ones in there. And also the ones in the studio are also calibrated. They didn't used to be, but they are now. At least that's what I've been told. Yes?
Do we need the pucks besides just the calibration part for this class?
I'm sorry, what?
Do we need to use the pucks besides the calibration for this course?
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. And if you have a monitor at home that you use, like for me, I actually attach my laptop to an external monitor. You want to calibrate both, and so it's designed to be that way. Questions about any of this? All right, I need you to follow, get into this. Again, if you've got trouble or problems with that, I'm less concerned about giving you a grade for this than I am about you not being able to get a color managed workflow going in your life. This is absolutely critical, because otherwise, pretty much everything else I'll tell you in this class is when it comes to color is meaningless. We good? All right. So, we are going to start with a different part. We are going to start with this guy right here, your camera profile. What we're going to do is we are going to build this part to correct for a camera. Now, we're going to do this with a file of mine, but I strongly suggest that you do this. Does anybody in this room have a copy of a file that was shot with your camera that has a color checker card in it? If you do, you can actually do this. Instead of using the working file that I'm giving you, you can actually do it with the file that you've got that has a color card in it. You need to be able to see the full color card. You guys know what I'm talking about, color card, a color checker. You need this. And you need to see the full part of this. If you've got a hand that's covering part of this, or you don't see all of this, this will not work. So I'm going to give you the file to actually do this with. But once you go through all of this, again, that's going to be the assignment. But for your own selves, you actually want to make these things for your own cameras and use them from now on. This will change your life. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so to start with this, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Oh, I want to start with something else first. It's also about this. So, I don't have that here right now, but that's okay. We'll get to it. Okay, so in our week number 2, there is a folder called Sensor Profiling. I need you to open that up. This will actually give you workflow steps for how you actually use this to build profiles that we can use in Adobe Photoshop, inside of Lightroom, or Camera Raw, but also in Camera Raw and Lightroom. How many of you guys are doing color correction work in Capture One? If you're doing work in Capture One does not support DNG profiles, which is what we're making, but you can use the very same system to create an ICC profile for Capture One And that's the directions for doing that are right here. If we have time later in the day, we can go through this part as well. But most of you are working in Camera Raw, and so that's where we're going to actually do the work on this. So inside this sensor profile folder, you should actually have a thing that says, another folder that says DNG custom example files, and inside that should be a raw file that looks like, if you click on look at the thumbnail, it's a girl in a sort of like a purple sweater with somebody holding a color checker right in front of them. Is everybody got this? If you have a DNG that's in this folder, I need you to get rid of that DNG first. And then I need you to bring this CR2 file into Photoshop.
But you want me to use my own information?
If you have your own, go ahead and use it. Do you have a good, flat, relatively lit shot of this?
The one we did in class.
Oh, yeah, then you're fine. You're fine. This will work great. So does everybody have this? Because otherwise, you're just going to be watching this lecture and going to sleep. Does anybody not have this thing open?
How did you make it CR2?
It is a CR2.
It is automatically?
Yeah,
This is
it's a raw file.
Okay, this said DNG.
No, I said if you have a DNG, throw the DNG away.
You can delete it because we don't have permission.
I'm sorry, what?
We don't have permission to delete it from the.
You can't delete the DNG? You're kidding me.
Probably in the shared drive.
It's what?
They're probably talking about they can't delete it in the shared drive, but they're in the shared one.
Are you on our server part? You can't do this from the server. You can't do any of this. You've got to download that whole set of files from the server to your computer.
No, I have that.
Yeah. And that's a CR2.
This is it.
Yeah.
It
that's
wasn't open at first. Thank you.
Okay.
I can't
Yeah, guys, you can't run any of our assignment files from the server. The server is too fucking tricky. It doesn't like any of that. So you've got to copy all of that stuff to your computer.
Wait, I'm having trouble. I did delete the DNG file, but I cannot open the CR2. And then,
I hate what they've done here. Go ahead and just hit done. Come up to the Apple menu, down to settings. And in settings, we need to come down to privacy and security right there. Click on privacy, scroll all the way down to the bottom of this. And click on open anyway. And hit open anyway. And then put in your security again, whatever you logged in this with. And hopefully this is not the administrative security part. Yeah, you're not going to be able to do this on this, which is a real problem because we can't open any raw file in here. The school has got to fix this. This is nothing. It's not your password. It's their administrative password. So you're just going to have to watch this part, and then if this does, you'll have the video, and we will then figure this out. But I know you have a Windows laptop. Is there some reason you don't want to work on that?
I can work on that, but we created one last semester on Windows.
So if you've done all this, then you've already done this. You can just use the stuff from last semester.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I mean, yeah, there's guys who've been through other of my classes where we've done this. You don't have to do this again if you know the process and you've already gotten it done, you're fine. You just turn that file in. So anyway, okay, so the first thing that we need to do with this is that we need to make a DNG of this. We need to make a copy of this. To do that, does everybody else have this open? Okay, to do that, at the very top of your screen, there's a little gear, top right-hand side of your screen. Right next to that little gear is a box with an arrow in it that's pointing down. If you click on that box, it'll open up a whole nother window for you, and this is where you can actually process your raw file into something else. If you've never been in here, you can simply leave it at its default. If you have been in here screwing around, you want to just make sure that in that sort of top quarter part where it says file extension, this is where you determine the type of file you want it to make. You want to go ahead and pick DNG lowercase, And then the rest of this you can simply leave at its defaults, and you want to hit save. And when you do that, if you do a bunch of them, because you can gang these up, you can do a bunch of these, you'll see a little line that goes along the bottom that indicates how fast this is all happening. And then you can hit cancel. We've actually done everything that we needed to do right now to start with. If you then go back to the folder where this was, where the original CR2 file was, you should have a DNG copy sitting in the raw file, sitting in that same folder. Does everybody have a copy of this DNG? Anybody not? Okay, now we need to go looking for the software that we are going to run this thing with. So if you go to your applications folder, you're actually looking for the color checker camera calibration software. This is what you're looking for. You should have installed this. This is one of the 3 softwares I ask you to install. So everybody should have this. So I need you to find it and I need you to launch it. And it should look like this. So did everybody get this open? Anybody not? I can wait. Don't be, again, guys, there's no point in just letting this go on. If you're having problems, please raise your hand and stop me and say, no, this isn't working. No, I don't have that open yet. All right, we good? Okay. So you are going to grab that DNG and you are going to drag it into this, not the CR2, but the DNG. If you can't see your DNG to grab it, you can always come up to the File menu and come down to, say, Add Image, and then simply navigate to that folder. Again, it's inside your O2 folder, inside the DNG example, sensor file, whatever. I can find mine right here, so I'm going to grab the DNG and drag it on top of that window and let go. And I am going to say that this is...
Is it because you have highlighted ICC and not DNG?
Could be. Thanks. Great call, Miguel. So if you take a look up at the very top of my screen here in color calibration, there are 3 options. There is DNG, dual illuminant DNG, and ICC profile. I've got the ICC profile one selected, and you can't use DNGs for those. I'm going to select a regular DNG. We'll talk about what dual illuminant is in a minute, but hopefully this is going to work, and it looks like it would. Miguel, you get the prize. And it should find that color checker and it should put it in your screen and it should lay this green grid on top of it. Now, if you are working in a file and that does not happen, you've actually got controls over here on the right-hand side that will allow you to move things around, that will allow you to zoom in, zoom out. The grid will be on it. It just won't be placed on the card like this. If you need to move something on your card because it's not really quite in register, simply hover over any of the little green dot corners. You can click on these and you can move stuff around. So this is how you would actually do it manually, but in my case, it's actually worked for me, and hopefully it's worked for all of you. So everyone should have this thing looking like this. Are we good on this part? Okay. So before you hit Create Profile, I'm going to go back to my image. And now in Macintosh, it's different. I want to select the name because you want to name your DNG profiles after the... A lot of people name it after the camera. You don't want to name it after the camera. You want to name it after the shooting that you were doing when you created this thing. So I come down, I'm going to select, click on the name. If you hit the enter or the return key, it will select just the name, and then I can copy that name. So either Command C to copy or go up to the edit menu and come down and do copy. It will copy the name so that then when I go to make the profile, I can give it that name. I don't want to have to type this long name into my save dialog box because that's just a nightmare for me. So, and then I'm going to come back into my color calibration checker, camera calibration, and I'm going to hit create profile. And it's going to say, okay, well, what do you want to call this thing? And again, to just call it a Canon EOS 5D Mark II, which is the camera that shot it, is not enough. I had 2 of those at the time. Which one is it? You have to do separate profiles for separate cameras. So for me, I actually, again, I name it after the shooting, not after the camera. So I'm going to then paste in now the name that I just copied. So for me, paste is Command V, and you can see it puts that name in. Now this also has my frame count on this one. It's got that 001. I don't need that part. I'm going to get rid of that. But then I've got to put in a number because I've got like 100,000 of these on my computer for this very same shooting. So I'm just going to put in an X after mine. You do not need to put in that X. It's just a way for me to know which one it is. In terms of where it is, you can now look in your drop-down menu. It should have found your camera profile folder. If it didn't, if this is like saving it someplace else, you need to let me know. If you click on this drop-down menu, you will actually see where it's actually put. So this is in my user folder, my user library, in application support, in Adobe, in Camera Raw profiles. That's where this thing is located. That will also be in the assignment. I don't know if I'm having you turn in these profiles still. I've tried to abbreviate those assignments as much as I possibly can. We'll take a look. If I am asking you to still turn in these profiles once you've made them, there will be in the assignment, it'll tell you exactly where they're stored and you can go in and get them there. We'll look at that in a second, but I don't want to stop this process right now. So I know that this is going in the right place. It's named correctly right now, and I'm simply going to hit save. And it's going to go through its steps. And it says it has been created successfully, and I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And then you can quit this program. We have everything that we need. So I'm going to quit this program, but now this next step is really important. We are going to create a new DNG and use this profile. If you make the mistake and you open up the original DNG that we made it, this DNG, it's now a raw file. You cannot change it. We can go in and process it. We can go in and do all sorts of things to it, but it in itself has been baked. You cannot change this. And I need to make a version of this that I change one thing before I create the DNG profile, and that is to add the proper camera profile that we just made. So I want you to throw this DNG away. And then we are going to start over. We are going to grab the CR2 file. We're going to bring it in to Photoshop. Once you bring it in here, you don't want to do anything to this file except change the profile in it. You are not going to change because we're going to create a brand new raw file where that we would then start all of our work from. It's the only way to have this profile that we just built actually embedded into our work. So to do this, if you look up at the very top underneath your histogram, you'll see that there's a little slot that says Profile. There's a drop-down menu, and there's all sorts of things that you can come down here, and you can also click on Browse. I don't actually use this. I use the icon that's to the right of that. It's actually the Browse Profile window, and it will open it up, and it will actually show you. There's a different set of profiles that are in here. Now, in my case, with my computer, I've got 3 of them that are sitting right up here at the top. I've got a neutral, I've got a faithful, I've got a landscape. And you notice is if I'm moving over all of these things, my color is actually changing somewhat. Do not click on any of these things. You just need to hover over them. None of them are true to a neutralized, unbiased description of color from my sensor that I'm looking for. That can only come from the custom profile that we just built. So to get to it, if you look down sort of at the middle part of this, there's a arrow that's sitting right next to a thing that says profiles. Click on that and it will actually open up. And the profile that you just made should be sitting right in here. And I got to look for the one of mine that's got the X on it. Nope. No. Oh, it's right here. So do not click on this profile yet. I just want you to hover off the thumbnail and then back on. And then off and then on. Look at the shift that's actually happening in the color of that sweater. It's massive. How the fuck can you do true color work when your camera is lying to you this bad? You are starting with a lie, then you're looking at your monitor, which is another lie, then you're printing out to a printer that has not used the proper profile for it, which is yet another lie. There is nothing in your color workflow that is being honest with you, yet you expect it to actually work. And it doesn't, and it never will. This is the first step. This is now correcting. If you take a look, if you zoom in on the color card itself, you can see what happens. I'm going to hover over mine. Just look up at my screen here really quickly. You can see when I hover over this that the blues and the cyans actually get darker. Look at this little square right here and this one right here. They actually get a little bit darker. What that's telling me is that my sensor is far too sensitive to blue. It's misreading the blue. Again, the more sensitive it is, the lighter it's actually treating blue. And that's not the case at all. How do you know to color correct for this? And if you knew, how would you even do it? Oh, I need to desaturate just the blues? How much? And where's the cutoff on the blue? I've got some in blue, some in cyan. By the time I get to the aquas, I got nothing. There's no way that you can do this on your own. There's no way to eyeball this. There's no way to do any of that. But if we then click on that profile, so I'm clicking on it now to actually use it, up to the right underneath the histogram, there's a word that says back with an arrow pointing to the left. Click on that. It will go back, and you will see that that profile has now been embedded in this image right here. You can see it. And now we are going to make a DNG of this. Do not do anything else in your image, because anything else you do in your image will be embedded as part of that DNG. And we want our DNG to be a clean starting point raw file. So then again, just click on the arrow in the little box and get the drop down. Oh, before you do that, you can actually color balance this. That's not going to be a problem. To color balance this, I'm going to click on the little eyedropper next to color, and I'm going to come over onto my screen. And what you want to do, what color balancing really does, we keep talking about this, is that it neutralizes anything that should be a neutral gray in your image should have equal amounts of RGB. So when I hover over, for instance, the red patch, you can see your RGB readouts up in the top of the histogram, and you can see I've got a 198 red, 53 green, 67 blue. That is not the same values. If I hover over the gray patch that's right underneath the red, you can see up there I've got a 194, 197, 197. That's close, but that's not equal amounts. Miguel.
Just had a question, since I was starting it with the file that I had. Even though I had the file from last year that I
Right.
in,
Yeah.
I still want to just understand the process, just go over it again and just like structure it. But if I would have color temp or did the color checker before the first step, like when we created the first DNG,
Right.
is that an issue? Or
No, not at all.
Oh,
Got nothing to do with it.
okay.
So if I click now on this gray patch that's right next to the red, you will now see that the values up at the very top, They're almost identical. I've got a 197, 197, 196. That is now color neutralized. Look what happens. Come over and click on the red. And you'll see it tries to color balance this. It can't do it. It doesn't. There's not enough leverage in the tonal correction of this to actually neutralize it. But now when you hover over that gray patch, you can see they're wildly different. I've got an 85 red, a 199 green, a 212 blue. But when I click on it, all of those colors, all of those RGB values become equal. That is white balancing. And now we're going to create a D&G of this. So up to the file menu, up to the very top right hand next to the little gear, looking for the box, it's got the arrow in it. Click on this, save this file, and then you can say done. And now when you will see that you do have a D&G in here. If you double click on this D&G, it will go right back into Camera Raw. Actually, in my case, it's going to probably start, my beta version of Photoshop. Doesn't matter, it'll be the same. You'll actually see this profile is right here. It's embedded into this. This is a critical step. So for your assignment, to do all of this, it is create a custom D profile for each capture in the assignment folder. So I'm going to click on this and it will walk you through. It's going to say in the assignment folder, create a custom D&G profile using the color checker calibration software for each file that's in the assignment. Name the D&G profile with its respective raw file name, again, just like we did. Apply the appropriate custom D&G profile and white balance both of the raw captures that are in that folder, and save all of the color corrected files as new D&Gs by clicking on the save image, exactly the part we just did, so you can follow the video on that. And remember, the file that you turn in is not the original D&G. That first D&G that we used to go into the software to create the custom one has got a profile already embedded in it, and you cannot change that profile. It will always default back to the one that was embedded when we created that, which is either Adobe Standard or Adobe Color or whatever generic one Adobe assigned to it when we created it. So the first one is, you cannot use the first one. You've got to use the one that you saved, that you actually used the custom profile on and saved, again, starting from scratch. So are there questions about any of this? Yes?
Yes. Do you know how to rename the file from when it's on Windows? Because I'm not sure.
Sometimes so you want to rename that guy? A lot of times it's hold down, it's your control key and click on the file, and you might get a drop down menu, or it's a right click. Just keep holding it down and click on the file. So it's not that. So how do you do a right click on this?
I think it's like 2 fingers.
Then try 2 fingers, and there you go. And you should be able to show more options. How bizarre is that? Anybody know how to rename a file in Windows? Just a file that's just sitting in there? We'll find out during the break. Okay. Questions about any of this? All right, I say this in my assistant class all the time. So you go to work for, again, most of you, when you graduate from here, you're not going to start a photo studio right away. You're probably going to go to work for somebody, which is how everyone does it. You'll become an assistant or digital tech, and how important do you become when you walk into the studio and you just look at the photographer and say, well, would you like me to profile all your cameras before we start today? And they're going to go, what? And you'll say, yeah, I mean, you might as well have true color that you're working with. I mean, why would you fight that? Whatever, I can do it really quickly for you. And they'll go, okay, because they'll have no idea what you're doing. And believe me, it's that kind of shit that gets you asked back the next day and the next week and get you a career. All right. Now would be another great time for a break. I got 3 o'clock. Let's make it a hard 10. I'll see you guys at 3:10. Okay, so there's another file that I want you to find right now. So it's still in our class week 02 folder. And let me see the one that I actually want. Yeah. So if you go up to, again, it's the same place we were looking at, I think, before. It's this really long string of numbers, but at the very end of it, it's Woods_07. There's a folder that says that on it. This is where I want you to actually start. Again, you may have some D&Gs in here. If you do, if you can throw those away. We don't need to do those. What I'm looking for, also, if you have XMP files in there, let's get rid of those as well. And you should end up with simply 2 CR2 files in there, frame number 001 and frame number 002. Hopefully this is going to work. I don't know.
Should I put it on?
Yeah, double click on them and see if hopefully it'll let you get into camera raw. Thank God. Okay, I want you to select both of these at the same time. We want to open them at the same time. So I'm going to select on frame number 1, hold down the shift key and select frame number 2, and then again open both of those in Photoshop. I'm going to quit my other Photoshop. Okay, so inside both of these, you can see I've actually got a color checker that's in here. It's a big version. It's actually the exact same pattern. This was the original one before they actually made the smaller ones. This is the one people have been using forever. So that's why it looks different, but it's actually the same thing. And then there's an image underneath it that doesn't have a color card in here at all. So I want to talk about how we actually use this card, the numbers that I'm looking for, some suggestions that I'll actually make about working with your file, and then we will go from there. Let's see if I actually have. Oh, I do. I misplaced this. I'm going to pause the video. You're not going to see this hear this on the video because we got to look on the board back here. So hang on one second. Okay, I'm not going to do this on here. I'm going to actually do this in front of the class, but you'll be able to follow along. So, color checker, again, the thing we've been talking about. So this color pattern on here is really precise. It's what allows us to do those custom sensor profiles. Worked great. But then along the bottom here, we've actually also got a grayscale. And the grayscale goes from a relatively dark color. I wouldn't really call that a black, but it brings it all the way up to white right here. This white is a real thing. So if you take a picture of this card and you want to establish perfect exposure, what you do is you color balance first so that you get a real read of the real numbers on this, and then you hover over this white patch. And what do I want this white patch to read numerically?
245 to 250.
Why not 255?
Because then you never know if it's low now unless you test it out.
So Miguel's absolutely right. So what I'm looking for perfect exposure here is I want this little white patch to read between 245 and 250. because it's real. It has texture. It has detail in it. If I set this at 255, I'm overexposed because this is no longer a real thing. This is the same white as my paper. This is page white. I don't want that. So when I go in to do a shoot, I always put a color card in here. I shoot the picture. I always shoot tethered. I don't care if I'm running. I don't care if I'm riding horses. I've got a fucking computer strapped to my back and I'm reading these values. That's how important this is. How many people in this room have had perfect exposure? Everything that you've ever shot. Not ever. What you've shot in the last year. Perfect exposure. There's cheaters in here. There's people who've been through other classes of mine. Changed your life though, didn't it? Right? I haven't had anything less than perfect exposure in 25, 30 years because I use this. I don't ever overexpose, and God forbid, I don't ever underexpose. Underexpose is the worst thing in the world you can do. So how do I know that this should be 245 to 250? We all just looked at it, and you all just told me that's what it should be. That's highlight detail. That's where this number comes from. So when you're shooting, you have this color card in there, you shoot a picture, you color balance, you measure this white thing, and you adjust your exposure. You do not adjust exposure in software. You don't say, oh, well, I'm just going to add a stop and exposure in Camera Raw. That defeats the whole purpose. You change your lighting, you crank your lighting up if it's underexposed, you bring your lighting down if it's overexposed, you change your aperture on your camera, you certainly can do that. You do all of those things so that this, without any software manipulation at all, reads between 245 and 250. Change your life. This thing also is your color balance, your white balance. I do not use the white patch, even though it's called white balance, to do the white balance. I use the patch that's right next, the gray patch that is right next to the red. You can see it on this image right here, the one that's right down here in the middle. You want to do your color correction somewhere in the middle of your tonal curve. You don't want to do it too close to the top. There's not enough room to do a good correction at the top. There's also not enough room at the bottom. You want to do this in the middle. If you think about doing curves in Photoshop, most of you grab the midpoint of a curve and bring it up or down to control things like exposure or to increase your red or decrease your red or that kind of stuff. That's why we picked this to actually do the color balance, that patch right there. So this gives me perfect exposure, it gives me white balance, and it gives me a sensor profile. What more do you want? Do you realize that in the course of the last 2 hours, you have just taken your photography from somebody who wants to be a professional to knowing more shit than the majority of the professionals working in the world know? And your work will reflect that. And your ability to work for other people will be reflected in that as well. This class is about professional grade level. I do not want you to make pretty pictures that, I don't know, somehow tug at the heartstrings. I don't give a shit about that. I want you to make the most incredible killer pictures in the world, but I want you to do it with the best data, the least amount of time, the least amount of effort to get to where you actually want to be in all of this. That's what this is about. So, is this a lot? Fuck yes, I know this is a lot. Are you going, half of you right now going, why did I sign up for this class? I didn't need this. All I can say to you is that hang in there. Not only does this build on itself, this kind of stuff that we're talking about right now will be second nature to you in a month and a half. You won't even be thinking about it. It'll just be natural. It's, oh yeah, I'm going to do that, bang it out, off to the races. You're not dicking around with trying to like, oh, okay, I'm going to try, I can make it a little more red and print it out again, and I'll make it a little more blue and print it out again, I'll make it, oh, now it's got two, whatever, and print it out again, whatever. All of that goes away. Anyway, it's my pitch to say, hang in there with me. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is color balance this. I do not have a custom profile on this. I have everything I need to make a custom profile, so I would make a custom profile of this first. Then I would use that, but we've already gone through that process. I'm not going to do it again. So my first move here is to color balance. So I'm going to grab the white balance tool right here. I'm going to click on that patch that's right next to the red, and you can see it changes the color dramatically in this. If I hover over my white patch right now, you can see I'm reading 235, 235, 220, 232. What is that telling you? What should it read?
Exactly.
245 to 250. It's not reading that. It's reading 235s. What does that tell me? I'm underexposed or overexposed? I'm underexposed. There's no direct correlation. You can't say, oh, you're 10 points under here, so that's a third of a stop. You just have to, for me, I would add a third of a stop to my exposure here, and then just see where I'm at. And if it was enough, great. If it was too much, I would back it off. I mean, you guys get all of this, right? The reason I point this out is that I don't shoot tethered to Lightroom. I only shoot to Capture One. Capture One has a completely different processing engine for raw files than Adobe does. And if you open this file in Capture One, those values will read 245, 245, 245. They are slightly different in Photoshop, but that's the way of all raw processors. How many people in this room have ever processed a black and white negative? Oh, that's so sad. No, I'm doing everything I can to try to bring analog film class back to this full-blown film cameras, shoot the whole thing, but we'll see. Anyway, for those of you who haven't, or for those of you who have, whatever you know, especially those who have, there are 1,000 different film processors that you can use that process your film 1,000 different ways. That same thing exists in the digital world. Capture One, in my opinion, does much better job at processing skin tones than Camera Raw. Camera Raw, it always has red skin tones in it. The custom profiling in Camera Raw actually helps that red considerably, but if you haven't noticed, I'm already got really, really, really red, ruddy skin, and so I'm sensitive to that. So anything that makes my skin just that much redder, I'm like, fuck that, I'm gonna go to Capture. And anyway, no, Capture One excels at doing skin tones. So, but it's different. So at any rate, I'm trying to stress to you that when I made this exposure tethered to Capture One, this thing was exposed perfectly. Now that we're in Camera Raw, it's a little bit different, but I can live with this. So anyway, that's where I begin in this whole process. But now I want to figure out where my shadow detail actually should be. So if you take a look around this image, I'm going to zoom into this area that's sort of right at the top of her waist. This area right in here. And you've got to ask yourself in here, what do you think in this area should really be true shadow detail? So I'm looking at the area right underneath her arm where that's intersecting the top of those shorts and her arm. And I believe that that should actually have shadow detail in it. However, if I actually look, let me find a different spot to look at. If I look at right underneath the color card in here, you can see the sort of the area that I'm at right now. I've actually still got shadow detail in there. So I've got shadow detail pretty much in all of this. I don't have a solid black in here. So if I actually want to see where my solid blacks are, if you go to your histogram and you click on the little icon that's on the far left-hand side, if you click on that, anything that is truly black in here will show up as blue. It'll be flagged. If you click on the white one, the little white icon at the top of your histogram, you'll see that things get flagged in red. So this red right area is telling me that this is a 255, meaning that's page white. That's got no detail in it. I don't really have any blue in here, so I'm not seeing that part. So I think I can probably push my blacks up a little bit, but what I'm worried about is that this area right in here is where I do want shadow detail, and it is right in those mid-20s. So I would say that for most part, could I find something to take to a deeper black? Maybe, but I can't do it at the expense of this area right here. So for me, this is probably as processed as good as this thing is going to be processed. However, Adobe has gone to great lengths and expense to give you a button to see so you can see what Adobe thinks. If you come up right under your histogram button and click on the auto button, everybody in the world should just do that to see what ends up ultimately happening. So when I click on it, you can see it has bumped my exposure slightly. So if I look at my color card right now and read this, it's actually reading like 180, whatever. It's completely off. So that auto move fucked up my color It did all sorts of other stuff to this, whatever. So I do not want any of this to happen, right? I was really close. This just screwed it up. So I'm going to click on auto again, and that will undo it and take all that screw part off. And now I'm back to my closer to, I still don't look like I'm white balanced. Yeah, it removed the white balancing as well. So it did an auto in the white balance. So I don't want that part to happen. So again, I'm feeling pretty good about my exposure. Everything else that I've got working on here, I'm feeling relatively good about. What I'm not feeling good about in all of this, and now I've got to remember how to ultimately get to this guy. Hang on one second. They've moved where a lot of old stuff actually used to be in here. So let me check it in Camera Raw defaults. Yeah. So you need to change something in here. So because by default it is not turned on. To change this, if you guys scroll down and you look at optics, you will actually find an optics panel that you can open up. I need you to open up that optics panel. I'm going to turn off my highlight warning just so that we don't get confused about this. With the optics panel open, in my case, I have got remove chromatic aberration is checked and use profile corrections is checked. Are yours checked? No, they are not. And this should be the default in Photoshop, but it isn't. So I want to show you, you can look at this and see what happens to yours. I want to start with the use profile correction. I want you to, and I'm going to turn mine off so it's the same as yours, and then I'm going to turn it back on. I want you to just turn it on and off and look what's happening to your image. So you can see as you turn it on that it removes the vignetting that's happening around the edges. It also, this image, this lens itself, suffers from what they call barrel distortion. So what barrel distortion is that if you imagine taking this photograph and spreading it on the front of a barrel, you would notice that the center of the barrel is closer to you, appears closer to you, and the edges appear further away. And as you turn this thing on and off, that's exactly what is happening. When you turn it off, the center of the image appears closer to you, the viewer, and the edges on the side appear further away. That is because of that's an aberration in the lens that actually shot this. So I want to keep this profile correction on all the time. It improves an already really great lens. It removes. So there's two kinds of distortion you get. This is barrel distortion. You get the opposite can also happen. It's called pin cushioning. In pin cushioning, the edges of your image appear closer to you and the center of your image appears further, deeper into the image. You want to have this on all the time. So we're going to do that in just a second. I also need you then to move in to see where these tree limbs are right down that are reflected in the mirror under the guy's arm. There's some small ones down there. I need you to go to 400%, and then you need to go find that area. We may even have to go to 800%. But what I'm looking at are these tree limbs that are actually in here. Now I'm going to turn off my chromatic aberration, remove chromatic aberration, so that you can see the same thing. Yep, but if we even zoom in more, I'm going to come in I'm going to go into 800%. It'll be easier to see. So if you take a look at this right now, you can see along one edge of this image we have green. On the other edge of the image, it's really hard to see, but you've actually got magenta. Does that ring a bell to anybody?
Yeah.
What is green magenta axis? It is the A-axis in LEB. This is chromatic aberration, and the reason we have chromatic aberration, again, I'm going to pause the video because you'll never hear this. To Photoshop. If you then click on remove chromatic aberration, you can see that a lot of that goes away. So turn this thing on and off. You can see it especially around these little ones right here. You can see that, look at this, look at the green that's right in this slot right in here. and you click on remove chromatic aberration, and it's just gone. So you want these two things always on. To get them to be always on, come over to the little three dots that are on the side, the right side of your image. Click on the little three dots, and you're going to come down to Set Raw Defaults, and a dialog will open up, and you are going to click on you want to go to Defaults. It should go there for you automatically. You want to click on this drop-down menu and come down to Choose Preset, and then you're going to come down to, this is presets that you can do for tons of stuff, but you are going to look for, we're going to come down to Optics, and then across from Optics down to Lens Profile and CA, that stands for Chromatic Aberration Correction. You want to enable both of those, and as long as you leave this on like this, you will not have to go find that optics setting and turn it on for every file that you want to process inside of Adobe Photoshop. Yep. So I do not want to have to come in and every single file go down to this optics panel and turn them on. I want them on by default. So to get to that, the little three dots that are on the far right side, right here, take a look at my screen, these little three dots that are they're sort of in the very middle of your screen, all the way to the right. Can you find them? Got it? Click on those little three dots, and you want to come down to Set Raw Defaults. Again, take a look at my screen. Let go. It will open up. This is Camera Raw Preferences. We've already played in here a little bit, but we did not set this up because I wanted to show it to you here. Defaults has already been selected. If it hasn't been, select Defaults on the left-hand panel. And then in the drop-down menu for Raw Defaults, you're going to click on this drop-down menu, and you get like 3 or 4 of them in the beginning. You need to come down to the bottom one that says Choose Preset, and then you'll have tons of presets. There's all this stuff up here. There's the stuff up here, Adaptive Portrait. These are all preset sensor profiles. And as you come down, continue to work down, you can do presets for color. You can do presets for, these are also more color profiles, but keep working your way down. You'll ultimately go down, and then these things down here at the very bottom are sort of parts of the panels that are in Adobe Camera Raw. You want to find the Optics panel, and then if you come over to the Optics panel, you want to pick the one that's at the very bottom, the one that says Lens plus CA Correction, and let go. And you will see it shows up right here as in Optics. It's the Lens plus CA Correction, and say OK. That will now turn these things on by default. So you will automatically get lens correction, so it will remove the distortion and the vignetting of your lenses. And then it'll also remove chromatic aberration. And chromatic aberration, I mean, obviously we're in at 800%. It's hard to see, but this thing can screw up so much in your processing, you can't believe it. We'll see it actually happen later. Okay, I'm going to click on to fit into place right now. So this, for me, is where I would start to process my file. And you want to do as much of the processing of your file here inside of Camera Raw as possible, because we are working on raw data right now. The minute we bring this into Photoshop, that raw data gets baked. It's no longer has anywhere near the ability to change as a raw file has. A raw file has this incredible range of being able to process in different ways. Once you bake that file and get it into Photoshop, things get much, much, much more limited. So this is the place to do as much of the heavy lifting as you can. That being said, this is not a place to turn into something into black and white. Are we good on this part? Okay, but I don't want to use this image. I want to actually use the second image. The second image is I'm not planning on, although I make jokes about this, I'm not really planning on having a color card in all of my work, although it would be a signature look. So what we need to do is we need to apply everything that we did from this first image to the second one that's underneath it. So to do that, and this is true, if you have your thumbnails along the bottom, it doesn't matter, they'll all happen in the same place. you want to come up to the thumbnail that is actually active, and you want to come up to its upper right-hand corner, and you'll see when you get up here that you'll get a drop-down menu that has got that box with the arrow pointing down. If you clicked on that, you could make a DNG out of this. It's the same as the other arrow that's right over here. But what I care about is the 3 little dots. That's what I need to work with. So I want you to click on the 3 little dots that are up there. A window will fly open. And in this case, you can do a select all. That's what we're going to do. So this works on, you could have 1,000 images open here, and this would work on 1,000 images. So we're just going to click on select all, and you'll notice it puts a gray border around the image that we have not touched yet. So that's now been selected as well. However, the primary that's got the really white, strong white border around it is the one that's still visible. You want to go up to that same exact corner of the thumbnail that you're working on, 3 little dots. You want to click on those and come down, and you want to do sync settings. So if you click on that, a window will open up and say, well, what do you want to sync? And there's some presets in here. The default on this one will be fine because it's doing everything that we actually want it to do. You can see all that we did on this is we had a little exposure adjustments in here. We did color, and we also did optics. Those things are all in here. The things that are turned off are lens blurring and cropping off. If you only done a small amount of this, you can actually use a different preset. You could actually say all, and it will check everybody. The reason that they don't do that for everybody is a lot of times people will crop inside of Camera Raw. And if you click on this to crop everything, they'll all be cropped exactly the same. And so most people want to sync things like color and exposure and optics and that kind of stuff, but they don't really want to sync, they don't want to sync spot removal, they don't want to sync cropping, they don't want to sync. So anyway, that's what all these drop-down things are about here. You can actually do your own set. You can come in here and check which ones you want or not. But in our case, we want everything. So I'm just going to select all and then click OK. When you do that, this under image now has been radically changed. So this guy now is my new, this is actually where I'm going to start working with my image. This is this is now what I would bring into Photoshop. Now hopefully all of you down at the very bottom can see something that says open object, not just open. How many people have an open object? How many have just open? So if you have just open, you need to change something. The thing that you need to change, there's a hyperlink at the very bottom of this screen. You want to click on that hyperlink. You want to go to workflow. This is again Camera Raw preferences, and you want to click on open in Photoshop as smart object. It just sets this default as open object. I need everybody to hover over it. Don't click on it yet. Hover over it and hold down your shift key, and you will see it changes from open object to open. If it was only open and you held down the shift key, it would change to open object. It always gives you the other option, the opposite one that you have. But in our case, we want to open this as an object. And here we are into Photoshop. And this is now where I would begin to actually do my work in Photoshop. The advantage to what I did to open this as a smart object is you can see there's this little weird icon in the lower right-hand corner of the thumbnail. If your thumbnails are the original size, those things are really hard to see. So if you click on the menu of the layers palette and come down to panel options and click the radio button next to the big icon, you can actually see shit like that. But it's surprisingly the other things that you can see. So I always use the big versions of that. So a couple of things to also think about while we're in this space right now. Is everybody in here using the retouching workspace?
I can't find it.
I'm sorry?
I can't find it.
So yeah, I mean, again, we need to start working on your computer because they clearly are doing something with these computers. They're not keeping them up, and that's just, I'm sorry, but anyway, says you don't want to keep this happening. All right, so anyway, if the rest of you were doing this, we looked at this before. If you grab the top of your application frame, so I'm grabbing the area that's right next to the Adobe 2026, I can pull this thing all the way down. I can move it to other places. But if I want it to snap back as big as I can get it, so you can see part of it's out of my screen, if you just hover over that same place right next to the word that says 2026 and double click really fast, it will come back up. It will resize completely to be as big as it can possibly be, yet show you everything. If you then double click on the hand, your image will also go as big as it can possibly go given the application frame and the palettes that are on both sides. If you double click on the magnifying glass, your image will go to 100%. If you then double click on the hand again, it will go back to as big as it can be. So it's a great thing to do a quick double click, because that way you go back and you can see the entirety of your image. So you know when you're retouching, you can get really lost in certain areas, whatever. This double clicking part will bring you back. Questions about this? Yes?
Originally, I wasn't able to open them both at once, so I have the second one that I made changes to that, but I didn't have the one that I wrote right here.
Did you select them both and open them both at the same time?
I tried to, but it still just.
So closing both those up, get out of camera wrong.
I did like the shift A.
No, just shift. And then select the second one. And then
And after that is where it got fuzzy.
then just drag those on top of Photoshop to open them.
Maybe I should click.
No, here, just come back into Photoshop here. Just, yeah, because this is in Photoshop, but again, this is not our workspace at all. No, that's all right. So again, we can't even get to see where it is. So yeah, you're gonna have to click this guy. And don't save that. And then start Photoshop again. Yeah, and then how do you make your screen full? That guy? That's what I thought it was. I think it's that guy. Yeah, so none of this is how we're actually working with this stuff. So if we want to change your preferences, I can give you the file to do that. But if this way, anyway, it doesn't matter. Go back to those two files now. And drag both of those on top of the Photoshop icon at the same time.
Not here, but here.
No, it's down here. It's whatever your Photoshop little icon, that one right there. And just hover. And then try this. Hold them both. Hold down the shift key because they're not both selected again. No. And then here, just click out of here. Just click down in here someplace so it's not, sorry, touch screen. And then just double click on them both. Or just double click on one of them. It should open in both. No, it unclicks and unchecks that one. Yeah, we'll look at this right after class. No, but anyway, yeah. If you really get screwed up like this, you can always do the settings that you did just here. Click on those little three dots and come down to, oh, this doesn't matter because you can do it. So click, you can just come out here and hit cancel or then click on the other one. And then come to those little three dots and come down and say apply previous settings. And there you go. Okay. So you can close this up. You do not need to save this. We're going to open the infamous red car again. So up to the File menu, down to Open Recent, and go for Red Car. Again, I'm going to double click on the hand to get the car as big as that I can get it right here. So we are going to talk about smart objects today. I know I've asked this already before. How many people in here are working with smart objects now? Oh, raise your hand up high, be proud. Okay, that's all going to change right now, and I'm going to show you why that's going to change. Make sure that this is still going. Yep. Okay. So a couple of keyboard shortcuts that we use all the time. The first one is I want to make a copy of this car. Now, in the majority of the work that we do in this class, making copies, at least initially, of the file when it first opens is critical. Because the thing that I've got right here, I call that a virgin. This could be my only copy of this file. And if I fuck this thing up, and all of a sudden I'm doing this for a client, and I screw up the one file that they have actually given me, and there's no way for me to recover, I'm never going to work for those people again. It's the same thing for you. If you screw something up that badly, never going to happen. It's just frustrating. And anyway, don't want to do that part. So the very first thing I want to do before I do anything is simply make a copy of this layer right here. So to do it, you hit Command J. If I say Command, it's Control for Windows people. Command Control are interchangeable in the Macintosh and Windows world. And you should now have a second copy of this layer that we can then screw up all we want, because because I've got the virgin that's sitting underneath this. Make sense? All right, Command J, the way to remember it is jump. That's what it is. We just jumped a layer. So I'm going to transform this layer. To do that, I'm going to hit Command T. That will bring up the transform dialog box. Now, when that comes up, every time we do most moves in Photoshop, you're going to want to look up at the very top of the screen right here. Right under the title that says Adobe Photoshop is the options bar. And this options bar changes depending on whatever it is that we're doing in Photoshop. When I hit Command T, it stands for transform. If you cannot remember Command T, you can always come up to the Edit menu and come down to Free Transform, and you'll see right next to it, it says Command T, and it'll do the exact same thing. So it'll actually give me the transform control handles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this image smaller. However, I don't want to see the image underneath it, so I'm going to go back over to my link because it's going to be confusing. I'm going to make it smaller, but you're going to see the original image underneath it. So I'm going to simply turn the eyeball off on the bottom layer. It's still there. It's still safe. But now when I transform, you won't see anything that's actually underneath this. It did get rid of my transform dialog handles, so I'm going to hit Command T again to bring them back. Whenever I do transforms, I want to keep things in proportion to one another. So if I want to change the height, for instance, I come up, if you take a look up at the very top, what you've really got going on here is you're looking for the W that's in the options bar at the top. That W stands for width, then H stands for height, then the next one is actually the angle or the skew of this, and then these other H and V controls actually have readouts for how the skew or the angle is actually applied. We're going to stay away from most of this. Most of that kind of work we'll actually do by eye. But doing the scaling thing, I prefer to do it this way. Now, you can change the scale in a number of ways. You can actually double click on the value. So I just double clicked on the height. It says 100%. I can change that value right now. Or if you hover over the word, the letter H, you get the scrubby slider. Scrubby sliders are how I do all of my changes in Photoshop. They work for just about everything. They work in opacity, they work in fill, they work in any place where you had something like this. So if I click on the H right now and I drag to the left, it makes my height smaller. But you'll see my width did not change. My width is still at 100%. You can go in the opposite direction. If you hover over the H, you can grab it and you can actually drag it up. And now my height is considerably taller. But it's not in proportion. It's not in proportion with my width anymore. I've radically distorted this car. That's not what I wanted to do. I simply wanted to make it smaller or bigger. So if you click on, there's between width and height, there's a little thing. It's supposed to look like a chain link. If you click on that, what it will do is that it will then take whatever you've been changing and apply it to the other. So you can see now my width and my height are both at 159. I can do the same work over the W. I can use the scrubby slider over the W and change the width, but now that they're linked together, they will change together and the car will simply get smaller, but it will keep its proportion. So I'm going to drag this down, and I want you to drag it all the way down to 5%. You're going to make a really small little car. So both of them now are at 5%. You should have it in the middle of this field that looks like a checkerboard. The checkerboard field is how Photoshop indicates transparency. And because I've got the other car turned off, there's no pixels that are in this area. So this is how Photoshop indicates that this is now transparent. So now I've made this car 20 times smaller than it was. I went from 100% down to 5%. To go ahead and accept that transform, if you look up at the top in your options bar, there's a circle with a slash through it. If you click on that, it will undo your transform, but the check mark right next to it will apply it. So I want you to go ahead and click on that, and you have a very small little car on a transparent background. Does everybody have the really small little car? That work for everyone? Okay. I don't want to undo this in history. What I want to do is bring it back to its original, but I don't want using history or an undo to do this. Instead, I'm going to transform the car again. So Command T, click on the link between the width and the height, and then you're going to change the value of the car to 2000. So I just double clicked on that 100%. And type in 2 with 3 zeros. The car has now actually gotten big again, and I'm going to click on the check mark. Is that what we started with? No. Turn on the eyeball for the underneath layer, so the background layer, turn on the eyeball for your car, and then turn on and off the eyeball for the car that we just transformed. When we made that really small and then made it really big again, both of those moves were destructive. When I made it really small, I threw away an enormous amount of information. When I made it big again, I actually threw away even more information in here. Destructive move. This will get you nowhere in life in retouching. This is a nightmare. You do not want to do this. So instead, I'm going to throw away this top layer. It's selected right now, so you could just hit the delete key or drag it down to the trash. I'm then going to make another copy of my layer, so I'm going to go through the process we did in the very beginning, Command J, but now I'm going to change this thing into a smart object. So to do that, you're going to come up to the layer menu and you're going to come down to Smart Objects over to Convert to Smart Object. And you will notice that there's that little icon that's down in the corner. So we need to talk about what a smart object actually is. Actually, we'll go ahead and do the transform first, and then we'll look at it. All right, so everybody got the second copy made, and everybody has got it now converted to a smart object? Okay, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Click on the link between the width and the height. Use the scrubby slider over either the H or the W and drag it down to where it says 5%. Don't worry, we'll turn off the visibility of the car underneath it in just a second. And hit the check mark. Turn off the bottom visibility layer, and you can see we've got our really small car again. It looks just like what we just did, correct? But now I'm going to hit transform again, Command T. And the first thing you should notice is this. You no longer have 100% up in the options dialog box. You've actually got 5%. It remembers what you did. It remembers that we went from 100% down to 5%. It remembers all that information. I'm going to click on the link between the two, and I'm going to type in 100 for the car and hit the check mark and say, okay. I just moved mine as well. And the car comes back, no harm, no foul. Is this making sense? So why? So this is what happens. I've got an image right here of this person. And when I transform this and I break it and I make it really small like we did in the very beginning, it throws away all the pixels that I no longer need to make up this image. It doesn't resample this, it just makes it smaller and jettisons everything else. And then when I make it bigger again, I'm trying to bring it back, but all of the pixels that it had to begin with are gone. So instead, when I turn this into a smart object, this is the best way to think about smart objects. A smart object is a protective envelope. So what I did was, when I turned this into a smart object, I took my image and I put it inside this protective envelope. Once it's inside here, I cannot do anything destructive to it. When I make this smaller, when I did the transform to make this smaller, it gives me, Photoshop creates the illusion that this has been made smaller, but the image, the file that's inside this thing is untouched. It is still completely exactly what it was. And so then when I do the transform to bring it back and open this up again, I'm good to go. No harm, no foul. Does that make sense, everyone? Oh, it gets better. So I'm a little bit off on my screen here, so to get this, because I accidentally moved my image, I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to just click at the very top of my history palette to get the car originally again, and that's weird because that's not how it should be. Just double click on the hand to get it all squared up. So I'm going to do the same thing again now. Actually, I take it. Yeah. I'm going to do the same thing again. Command J to make a duplicate of this. Up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. And again, I can do all sorts of things to this now, but I want you to paint on this. So I want you to grab a paintbrush, hit the B key to actually do that, and you will see that there is, you get this little icon. It's a circle with a slash through it. You cannot paint on a smart object. Go ahead and try. Black is my foreground color, normal blending mode. I'm going to make, I don't even know what size my brush is, but if I click to try to paint, then you're going to get this warning that comes up and it says, the smart object has to be rasterized before you can proceed. Edit content will no longer be available. Rasterize the smart object. Do you want to do that? No, I do not. I want to protect this, so I'm going to hit cancel so that that doesn't happen. Does this make sense? Okay, so can I edit this file? Right now, the file is actually inside this protective envelope. It is inside my smart object. I can take it out though. To take it out, you come over to your layers menu and you double click on this and it will open up and you will see if you guys did as I told you you might want to do and eliminated your tabbed behavior, you've now got two images and you will notice the second image that just came out up at the very top is not a PSD file anymore. It is a layer 1 PSD file. This is actually the image that was inside my smart object. I have now pulled this thing out. It is no longer protected. If you look at the layer, there's no little icon right here. We are going to invert this image. Hit Command I. It just changes it. It completely inverts it. And then I'm going to close this. It's going to say, do you want to save this? And I'm going to say, sure. And I'm going to save it. And you can now see I can edit things that are smart objects. But this is where I'm at right now. Does this make sense? To edit it again, I'm going to double click on it again. It will again open up as its own layer. Again, if you've got tab behavior happening, you're getting a second tab. So you've got to go find it. That's why I do not use tab behavior here. It's too confusing. I'm going to invert this again. It will take me back to what I originally looked like. I'm going to hit this and say OK and save it, and we are good to go. I'm going to hit the S key to get the clone stamp tool, and you will notice that again, you cannot clone on a smart object. It will not let you because, again, it is protected. If we actually try to do this, so I've got the S key, the clone stamp tool selected. My clone stamp is really small, so I'm going to make it, not that it matters, you still can't see it. If you hold down your Option key and click, and then try to change something, you again are going to get this warning, and it's going to say you can't do this. Now, a version of Photoshop just a couple of versions ago, instead of giving this warning, they've given you this warning for decades. Instead of doing this, they actually created a new blank layer on top, which allowed you to clone. But that's really disingenuous. That's not the way this tool is actually meant to work. So if you wanted to do that, you could. But anyway, that's what's going on here. Are we good on this part? Okay. So, but this is now Smart Object that is actually based on what happened was we had a baked file, not a raw file. We brought it in here and converted it to a Smart Object that protects it. But the real power of Smart Objects lies in the fact that you can embed your raw data inside of your Photoshop file. And that's what we're going to do next. So you can cancel this. We can close this up. You do not need to save this. So this is actually part of your homework. So I keep saying this. I can't believe the number of people who don't do this. If you do this next exercise with me, you will then be able to turn it in as your homework and get 100 on that, which would be great. And I've had people actually do, I can't tell you, my last class, half the people who did this in class never bothered to turn it in. And I was like, we just did this. So anyway, don't be that way. Actually do this in class. So we're going to start with the next file. And it's this Bruce Fraser. It's a DNG file. Again, it's in your student files, number 2. It's this Bruce Fraser 2005 copyright DNG. If you open that up into Photoshop, it is a raw file. It is a DNG, so it should open up into Camera Raw. Yours should probably look different than mine. Mine has actually been processed. The thing about DNGs is that DNGs really embed the XMP data inside of them, but they only remember the last version, the last way that they were developed. So this is the last way that it was developed. I want to start from scratch though. I want to start from this at its defaults. So even though yours may not look like this, I want you to make sure that you are at your defaults for this. So come over to the little 3 dots that are on the very right edge of this whole window. Click on those little 3 dots and come down to Reset to Default. This is how you can get an image back to the way it was when it was originally shot. And nothing has actually been done to this image. And then I'm going to process this thing. So I have been doing this for an extremely long time, this exercise that we're going to work on right now. And I'm going to give you settings. I'm going to give you how process settings for this. But the process settings that I am going to use for this were developed in 2010. That's 16 years ago. That's hard to believe, but it's true. So I want to give you the settings in the version of Camera Raw that existed when I created them. So most of you guys don't realize this, but every time Camera Raw has a major release, it's not like every time it releases, but pretty much every time it releases, they actually come up, they rewrite the color engine for Camera Raw. And also the palettes all change every time that this thing is done. We've got palettes now that we never had before. And so Photoshop allows you to go back and use any version of Camera Raw that ever existed. And the reason that they do that is that there are people who have very famous prints that they have released. And if somebody wants to buy another copy of that print, they need to be able to go in and process a file the same way it was processed in the beginning. Or let's say somebody else wants a different frame from a shooting than the one that was processed 10 years ago. So this allows you to use any version of Camera Raw that there was. So I need you guys to change the version of Camera Raw so that the numbers that I give you to process this file make sense. Does that make sense, everyone? I feel like I'm confusing the shit out of everyone. Okay. Sorry. To do that, if you come over to your panel on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, and you start to scroll down, it's almost down at the very bottom. It's the calibration panel. And if you open the calibration panel up, you will actually see at the top it says process, and there is a drop-down menu next to this. Click on this drop-down menu and you will see that there have been 6 major rewrites of Camera Raw. The version that I want you to use is number 2. If you click on that, a lot of things change. If you come up to the very top now, you'll actually see we do have profile that's still sitting up at the very top. That's not the way it was in that version of Camera Raw. But you'll look at the light. Now we don't have, we've got recovery, we've got fill light. None of that exists in the current version of Photoshop. Things are just completely different in here. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to give you the values that I want you to put in here. Now, this is weird because some of my classes think that the numbers that I'm going to give you here are somehow like magic. And I've had students actually process a completely different file, one of their own file, using the exact numbers that I'm giving you, thinking that somehow they're magic. They're not. They're for this image alone. I processed this file, just me, alone. That was it. So that's what we're going to do here. Before we do this, though, I want to ask you guys, let's go ahead and do this part first. So I need to make sure everybody is on version 2, process version 2. So again, all the way down at the bottom, the calibration, pick version 2. All the way up to the top part right now, I'm going to give you a set of numbers to simply enter. We are going to start with the color temperature. If you double click on the color temperature value, it's easier to type this in than it is to actually move the sliders. So the value that I want you to put in here is 6800. So 6800. If you hit the tab key, it will move you down to the next, right underneath it, the next thing to actually, so you don't have to select tint. You can leave tint at 7. If you hit the tab key again down to vibrance and put in 35, tab key again down to saturation, and saturation you can leave at 0. Now we need to go up to the light, to the exposure part up at the very top. In the exposure part, and I'm going to drag this on mine, you want a minus 0.95. So a minus 0.95. Now you can hit the tab key and go down to recovery. For recovery, you can leave it 0. Tab key. For the fill, you can leave that at 0. Tab key. For the blacks, you want to put in 18. Tab key. For the brightness, you want to put in 81. Tab key. For the contrast, you want to put in 56. And then we are going to come down to the effects panel, and you want to double click on clarity. And on clarity, I want you to put in 52. So to go over this again, starting at the very top, the exposure, a minus 0.95. Recovery, 0. Fill light, 0. Blacks, 18. Brightness, 81. Contrast, 56. In the color box, color temperature, 6800. Tint, 7. Vibrance, 35. In the effects, clarity, 52. And then we are going to open this as an object. If your menu thing down at the bottom says open, hold down the shift key and you will get open object, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and open this as an object, and it's going to come out onto my screen, and it's going to look like this. So for you guys, how would you then go in and dodge and burn this thing? My sky is like way too bright. How would you deal with that? Oh, please tell me you dodge and burn in your life. No, anyone, speak up. You don't have to. Go ahead, shoot.
I added a new layer that has the 50% gray fill, and then dodge and burn that.
So you add a new layer, a soft light layer or a curve?
Soft light.
Soft light. and then you paint with it, and if you paint darker, it gets darker, and if you paint lighter, it gets lighter.
Oh, the dark touching.
Well, here, let's talk about what you're talking about. Yes, now how would you do
I've
it?
done the curve. I've done add another
Curves.
layer and then do the curve.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of strategies for doing this. We will look at those later. We're not going to look at those now because I'm going to show you the way you should be doing it. Because right now, this is a baked file. This does not leverage any of those situations. Well, here, we can try one. If we put a curve on this, so come down to this, the icon at the bottom of your layers palette, that's the circle that's half black and half white. Click on it, and we're going to come up and we're going to put a curve on this. And I can darken this up. So I'm just going to grab the middle and I'm going to just bring this down. And you can see as I start to bring it down, well, again, it's doing two things. It's making my sky darker, and I can use a mask on this so it doesn't fuck up the background. But it changes all of the color in my sky. I mean, it's just like this is, and is that what you're looking for? Probably not. Well, let's just see what that does look like though. We're going to do a snapshot in history of this. To do that, come over to your history palette. Down at the very bottom of the history palette is a thing that looks like a little camera. If you click on that little camera, oh my God, they fixed it. I'm the happiest man in the world. Did you have a little dialog box that just opened up and allows you to name this? All right, then you don't have your preferences set correctly. Come up to the history palette. Across from it, there's your little menu. Click on that little menu. Come down to history options. Automatically create for snapshot is on by default. You need to click on automatically create new snapshot when saving, and you also need to click on show new snapshot dialog by default and say okay. And now when you click on that, you should get this thing that opens up. Did that work? No? Yes? No? It may be the version of Photoshop that you're in.
Yeah, I'm on 25.
Oh, yeah, then that's probably it. They've actually, this has been broken for years now. People have been rioting about this. I, myself included, and it looks like they finally have fixed it. So anyway, I'm going to watch my, yes? Yeah, so it's the little camera at the bottom. So you don't need to worry about yours. You don't need to do a snapshot. You can just leave yours. We're going to actually change it. I'm going to do mine cloud curve. And say okay. And then I'm going to turn my curve off. Instead, I'm going to show you the correct way of doing this. So that's one possible way of doing it. Anyway. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this smart object. What I'm going to do is, or hopefully ideally, is I'm going to make duplicates of this layer and I'm going to reprocess them for different areas of my image. Because that now leverages my raw data. And what I mean by that is, if you double click on this thing, it goes right back into camera raw. This is a copy of your raw data inside your Photoshop file. So I'm going to hit cancel out of here. I want everybody to save this file right now. So I'm going to save mine to my TOS folder. Save it. You're going to name it for an assignment next week, but I'm going to call it Castle. I call it or My Castle or Retouched Castle or just some name. Put it someplace where you know where it is, where you can find it. And then next week when you come in, we will do the true naming for this file and then putting it onto the server like we're supposed to do. So we'll go through all of that process together, but I don't want you to lose this file. So name it something and put it someplace where you can get it. So I'm just going to name mine. I'm going to do a save as. I am going to, in my drop-down menu format, either keep this as a Photoshop file or a TIFF file, either one. There's no real advantage of one or the other. They both do the same thing. And I'm going to call it Castle. And I'm going to throw mine on my TOS folder. That's where I keep everything that I don't want to hang on to anymore. And I'm going to hit save. It says there's already one there. I'm going to replace mine. If you get this compatibility warning coming up, maximize compatibility, we've already set that up in your preferences. Just click on don't show this to me again. That's annoying. And this will now be saved. I want you to then close this file up. So just get rid of it. It's now gone. And then I want you to open it again. up to the File menu, Open Recent, Castle. It opens back up, double click on the Smart Object. This is a copy of your raw data inside of Camera Raw. So you've now got a baked Photoshop file, but you have got the raw data that's embedded inside of it. You don't have to go looking for this evermore. If 20 years from now you wanted to reprocess this file, could you easily find the raw file that you made it from? No. But what if it's embedded in the file, in the folder, in the image that you want to work on? Yeah. Make sense? I can promise you, no one in this class has done this yet. Next level. So then let's actually do something else. I want to reprocess this file now to do the sky. That's what I want to build it for. So I'm going to hit cancel here because I've got this. I built this actually, the first exposure was for the grass, for the heather, the wood, for the trees, that kind of stuff. It was all for that. It's not for the castle, it's not for the sky. We are going to reprocess for that. So to do that, we're going to make a copy of this. Command J just makes a copy of it. Then we're going to double click on the new copy. It opens up, and I want to do just one radical change to this. So I'm just going to grab the exposure slider and drag it all the way down. This is not what I'm going to finally do, but I need to show you something and to show you the thing that you need to avoid. And go ahead and say okay to that. And what you'll notice that has happened is that it made that copy darker, but look what it did to the original one. So what is happening now is this is true cloning. So what I've got is I made a smart object. This is my raw data, and it's inside my protected folder. But when I copied this, all it did was make a reference to this same file in here. It did not make a separate copy of this image in here and give me another envelope. This is just another reference to the same thing. So we need to change how we do that. Hit Command Z to undo that. Throw away this top layer. And you are going to make this a completely different way. We are going to create another copy of this, but we are going to do it. This is the only way to do it. It's a very special thing. So if you don't get this part today, you're going to have to listen to the video or follow the video or whatever to figure out how you really do this. This is the thing that will trip you up. But this is how this whole thing of multiple smart objects actually works in developing a file. So you do not do Command J. You also do not click on this and drag it down. That's the very same thing. That will not, that makes, again, it's just a second reference to your smart object. To build a completely separate, brand new smart object with a second set of your raw data in it that you can process independent of the original one, you come up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, down to New Smart Object via Copy. Everybody take out their phone right now and take a picture of this. This is the thing, and just remember, this is how you keep from fucking this up. I'll wait. Are we good? All right, new smart object via copy. Now if we double click on this thing and do the same move, drag the exposure all the way down and say okay. Now you will notice that the one underneath it did not get changed. This is now a completely separate smart object with its own full set of raw data in it that I can process now just for the sky. So I'm going to double click on it again, and I'm going to give you a new set of values to actually put in for this guy. So we will start at the top and work our way down. For the exposure, I want the exposure at -1.5 stops. So change it to -1.5. Then for the recovery, hang on 1 second. This guy. Recovery 96. Tab key for the fill 0. Tab key for the blacks 32. Tab key for the brightness 60. tab key for the contrast 6, tab key for the clarity, which is all the way down in effects. Clarity goes all the way up to 100. Vibrance goes to 0. Vibrance is in the color. Here, let me start and do all the color first. Start at the very top of color for color temperature because we're changing all of it. Put in 4700. Hit the tab key for tint. It didn't like that, sorry. 4700 for the temperature. The tint you can leave at 7. And then the vibrance you are going to 0 out. And then the clarity is 100 all the way down. And say OK. So now this is the image that I've actually developed for the sky, but you can see it also screws up what I'm doing on my whole overall scene right now. It's made the whole thing too dark. So what I need to do is I actually need to mask out so that I can only see the, so that this image only impacts the sky, and the one beneath is the image that's actually so far the grass and the castle. So to do that, there's a million ways of making selections. Right now, if you come up to the select menu and you come down, you can actually see sky, and you can actually click on that and see how well it does. So this is using artificial intelligence to actually generate the selection of the sky, and it works pretty well. However, I'm going to look at this a different way, just because there's not always ways to actually do that. For instance, when we go to select the castle, there's no button that we go up to and say select castle. We will go over all the selection tools, all the AI ones, all the hand ones, all of those kind of stuff before. It's either next week or the week after, so we get to it pretty soon. So this is one way to do it. I'm actually going to hit Command D to deselect, and I'm going to do it in a different way. So I'm going to use the old school. I'm going to do the quick selection tool. To use the quick selection tool, it's the fourth tool down from the top. If you click on the lower right hand corner, you'll get a flyout menu, and you'll see that you have the object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand. I want you to grab the quick selection tool because I want you to know how this tool works. So I've got the quick selection tool picked. The quick selection tool is a brush. The way I actually make my brushes larger and smaller is I use the bracket keys. So if you look at the keyboard, at your keyboard, there's the P key. If you look just to the right of the P key, you will see opening and closing square brackets. Those actually make your brush larger or smaller. So the the key that's right next to just to the right of the P key makes your brush smaller. The one to the right of that makes it larger. So I'm going to click on mine to make mine larger. And I'm going to make it the size of about, I don't know, a nickel, quarter, something like that. And I'm going to start to select this. So the thing that you need to know about the quick selection tool is that it uses its own artificial intelligence to find edges, which means you cannot touch the edge you want it to find. So if we start, for instance, and we want to select the sky, I've got a problem with this. There are better ways that I can actually help this tool out. Look at the contrast between the sky and the grass. You can see the line, but it's not that great. But if you turn off the eyeball for this layer, look at that distinction between the grass and the sky. This has now got significantly more contrast. So the brush does not need to work anywhere near as hard. So you need to help the tools in Photoshop out. Don't just go in there and say, well, I'm going to use the quick selection tool on the image where I've got sky and ground are really close to one another. Help it out. I know that people will put curves on stuff to increase the contrast to make the tools easier to locate edges, and then throw the curve away once the selection has been made. So keep that whole thing in mind. You have to work at part of this. It can't just be Photoshop and the engineers throwing the latest, greatest shit at you. So anyway, I'm going to do this. So like I said, you cannot let this tool touch the edge you want to find. So if we start up in the very top corner, so I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner, I'm going to click and I'm going to start to drag across, and you'll see what I mean by artificial intelligence. This thing at a certain point is all of a sudden simply going to take off. And you can see I've only gotten halfway through the sky image and it's already selected the rest of it. It knew what I was actually going for. But I'm going to hit Command D to deselect again. Look what happens if I actually cross this line. I'm going to start and come down here and cross the line, and now you can all of a sudden see it's going into the field. And it's now looking for an edge further down. It's gone way past the horizon line, or the horizon edge that I'm looking for in here. This is not at all. Again, so when you use this tool, it cannot touch the edge you want it to find. So Command D to deselect. We'll just select the sky again really quickly. How many people in this room save your selections? That changes now. I don't care how little time or how long a time it makes to create a selection. You save them. So to save a selection, come up to your select menu, down to save selection. It's down at the very bottom. And we're going to call this sky because that's what it is. And say OK. If you then look over at your channels palette on the far left-hand side and scroll down to the bottom, you will actually see there's what they call an alpha channel sitting down at the very bottom that's labeled sky. If you actually click on it, you will see what it is. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect because I've still got marching ants. This is a mask. Selections and masks are the same thing. A selection that is saved becomes a mask. It becomes an alpha channel that I can use as a mask. Yes?
Where'd you do that again? I missed that stuff.
I will show you. I'm going to throw mine away. So to do it again, up to the top. I'm going to use the quick selection tool to make the selection. Up to the select menu, down to save selection at the very bottom. It opens up. Just call it sky. And say OK. Then Command D to deselect because I don't want to keep the marching ants. But if you scroll down to the bottom of your channels palette, this is why we have channel palette over here. Guys, I didn't make this workspace for nothing. This wasn't just an exercise to throw a bunch of shit at you. We use this thing to death. So now I've actually got the sky is actually sitting right over here. Does this make sense to everyone? Are we good? Okay. Hit Command D so that you do not have a selection going. There's two ways that we can do this now. There's two ways. I'm going to show you the way that I don't want you to use first, and then I'm going to show you the way I do want you to use it from now on. So if you want to then use this thing, because I want to put it on as a layer mask, so I'm going to turn on my sky layer again, and I'm going to make a layer. I'm going to load the selection. So to load this thing, come up to the select menu again, and now come down to load selection. And it brings you right, it's going to open up and it'll say, what do you want me to load? And I'm going to click on this drop down menu and say sky. And say OK. And there you go. It's back again. Does that? Say what? Let me just see. Yeah, because you got the yeah, click on no, not on the drop down menu. If it's the channel, expect. Yeah, it's okay, and you're good to go. Okay, so now we've got one going. But I said that is not the way I want you to do this. There is a much better way to load anything as a selection. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. I want you to hover over the thumbnail. Now here's the trick. So I'm down in my channels palette. I've got sky is actually down there. It is a mask. It's an alpha channel, but it is a mask. I want to load this. If you watch this screen, don't do this. If you actually click on the, not on the thumbnail, but on the channel part itself, the layer of the channel part itself, it will actually load that, and you can work on this. You can paint this, you can blur this, you can clone this, you can do, this is just another image. You can do anything you want to in this. But that's not what I want. I wanted to just load it as a selection. So I'm going to go up to the very top and select my composite channel. I'm going to come down, and this time I'm going to hover over the thumbnail. So I need everybody to just hover over the thumbnail. not the channel itself, but the thumbnail of the channel. And then I want you to hold down the command key. And you will notice when you hold down the command key that your cursor changes to a hand with a little box of marching ants. If you click on that, that has now loaded that as a selection. You can do this with channels, you can do this with luminosity layers, you can do this with curves, with paths, you can do this with, this is how you load fucking everything. It's just fast and quick. So I've now got my mask for my sky, and so now I need to add this as a layer mask. Oh, yes. So it's the command key. So here, I'll show you really quickly. Command D, hover over the thumbnail. Again, don't pick the layer. Hover over the thumbnail, hold down the command key, and you will see your hand, it turns to a hand with a little box of marching ants. Click on it, and you will see you've got the marching ants all along your sky. Make sure that you do have the sky layer now selected, and we're going to add a layer mask. To add a layer mask, when you have a selection, you simply add. It's the add layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers palette is the white rectangle with a black square in the middle of it. Simply click on that, and we have now added a layer mask to that layer. And so this is now a combination of both of these. So this is now what my image looks like with this new sky. So would you rather, I'm actually going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to do the same thing for my curve. Remember the shitty curve that we did? I'm going to get rid of this shitty curve. I'm going to load this as a selection again, and I'm going to put that on the curve so that the curve's only impacting my image, and turn this off. So do you like, and I'm going to snapshot these. So this is the curve, and I'm going to turn the curve off and put on my reprocessed one and snapshot that. And then I can simply go back and forth between the two. Do you prefer this one or this one? This one or this one? This one or this one? I kind of like the weirdness of this. I mean, it's sort of like surreal-y kind of thing, but completely unreal. Make sense? Okay, we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to throw away this. We're going to do this all again to process for the castle. So to do that, so it doesn't matter which one of these you duplicate. Oh, by the way, while we're still here, if you double-click on the name Bruce Fraser down on the very bottom one, we're clicking right on the name, not on the thumbnail. If you click on the thumbnail, you'll open it up into Camera Raw. But double-click on the name and just call this Base, because that's what it is. Come up to the Sky one, double-click on the name up there and call it Sky. And then it doesn't matter which one of these we actually process again. I tend to go in distance. I like to work in distance the way I think about distance. So I think about the grass is first, the castle is second, and the sky is third. So I'm going to reprocess for the castle. I'm going to do one more layer for the castle. So I'm going to put it in between these two. So I'm going to put a new version of this in between. It's going to be on top of the base, but underneath the sky. So to do that, click on the base, and remember, you cannot do Command J, you cannot drag it down. If you do, you simply make a clone of the reference that goes to the smart object. You have to come up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, New Smart Object via Copy. It will now, we have 3 copies of our raw data in here that we are processing 3 different ways. You cannot do that in Lightroom. You cannot do that in Capture One. You cannot do that anywhere that I know of other than Smart Objects in Photoshop. Game changer. Double click on this smart object. First off, let's rename it. We're going to call it Castle. Double click on it, and I'm going to give you one less set of values to actually put in. So we're going to start up with the exposure part, and for the exposure part, I want that to be minus 1.5. And then I'm going to go down to recovery, and recovery, I want that at 52. Tab key, for fill, 27. Tab key for blacks, 16. Tab key for brightness, 91. Tab key for contrast, 68. Then we're going to come down to color. So double click on color. That can stay at 68. It's what it should be. Tab key, you can leave the tint at 7. Tab key for vibrance, change that to 0. And then finally, the clarity on this also needs to be at 100. So come all the way down to clarity and effects and go up to 100 and say OK. So now this has just been processed for the castle. However, it's overriding everything. So I need to just select the castle itself. So I'm going to stay with the quick selection tool. To zoom in and out of your image with any tool you have selected, if you hold down the space bar and the command key or the space bar and the control key for Windows, you will temporarily get the magnifying glass. If you add the option key to that, you will get the negative magnifying glass. So the advantage of this is that when you let go, you still have the tool that you had selected. So it's not like you're selecting the magnifying glass tool and then having to go find the quick selection tool again. It's just a temporary way to do that. So I'm going to hold down Command and Space to actually zoom into the castle so that I can see it. If you just hold down the space bar, again, no matter what tool you have, you will get the hand that will allow you to reposition this in the middle. And then you let go, and I've still got my quick selection tool active, and I can use it right now. But the tool is way too big. Remember, I want to select the castle, and I cannot touch any of the edges that the castle touches. So, I mean, any of the edges of the castle, I can't touch where the sky is, where the grasses are. So I use the bracket key just to the right of the P key. It will make my quick selection tool smaller, considerably smaller. And then I'm going to start in this area over here, and just on the left side of the castle. I'm going to click and start to drag. Now, it is already selected part of the hedges underneath it. Do not worry about that. We will fix that in a second. I just want to go ahead and get the rest of the castle. So I'm going to come up to the top. I'm going to go through all the rest of it. And it's done a pretty good job on everything except for this grass that's in the front. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Again, hold down your space bar and the command key and zoom in. Let go of the command key. You've just got the hand so that you can move it to center it. And then right now, this is the quick selection tool plus. If you look up at the very top in your options bar, you can see it's the one that's got the little plus on it. We need the one that's got the little minus on it to remove the hedge stuff from that. You could click on that, but the easier way to do it is to simply hold down your option key. You'll notice that the little plus inside the tool changes from a plus to a minus. But again, you cannot let this tool touch the edge you want it to find. So I cannot cross over this area of the grass where it's over the bricks. I want to get close to that, but I do not want to go over it. Otherwise, it's going to start looking for a line or an edge in the bricks, and that's not what I want. So I'm just going to start on this side right here, and I'm going to work my way slowly through this and bring it around. And again, do not let this thing touch any edge you want it to find. And that's done a pretty fair job of it.
Did you do the deselect of it?
How did I do what?
The deselect to change it.
So you've got the selection, but it's too much, right?
Yeah.
You've still got the quick selection tool going, right? Add the option key. There's one little edge right there that I need to get. Done. So now I've got a fair selection of the castle. Again, double click on the hand to kick back out. I'm going to save this selection. So up to the select menu, down to save selection, and call it castle. And say OK. And finally, I'm going to add this as a mask. So I've got an active selection going. Simply click Add Layer Mask to this, and this is now my composite. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, but you got to do that with a soft light layer or curves. Look at this. Now, a lot of people would look at this and say, well, oh, Versa, this is just like way overdone, right? You can go in and change things. So let's say that you brightened up the castle too much. It's a little too strong. Simply select your castle layer, hover over the word opacity. Again, I don't go in and do the little click down menus. I don't do any of that shit. I simply hover over the word for opacity and I start to drop it down and it lessens the impact. If you go all the way down to 0, it removes it. If I bring it back up, it'll like hit somewhere in the middle and I think, yeah, that looks pretty good. If you feel like the sky has got too much drama in it, you can actually grab the sky and you can actually start to pull the whole thing down and it gets lighter. You start to remove so you still got ways to adjust this. You can still double click on this and say, you know, the sky is too blue. I want to warm the sky up. So you simply open up the smart object, grab the color temperature slider, and let's warm the sky up and say, okay, and now you got a warmer sky. You cannot imagine the power that you now actually have to dodge and burn and to build your files. This is fucking next level. You can do things that people simply don't think can be done because you're leveraging the raw data. Raw data is just this incredibly powerful thing that it's shocking what you can eke out of it. Yes?
So you never use the dodge and burn tool?
Not for dodging and burning. Ironically, I use it for skin retouching in a big way. Yeah, in a way that you'll all grow to hate. No, that's okay. So there's some people in here who actually said, if you want to know how to really touch, we're going to get into how you really seriously do high-end skin retouching. And it's very tedious and long and arduous, whatever, but it does an amazing job, and it largely involves dodging and burning. Question about any of this? Okay, save this file. Next week, when we come into class, we will take this file, you will turn it in, you will get 100 on it because you all did this correctly, and that's all I got for you today. And I'll see you next week. So I just want to mention one other thing really quickly. See what time it says up on the screen? It's like to the minute when this class should end. That's how every single one of these classes ends up being. It's just, I've got so much to get into your all's brains. Take that as a good thing. I know these classes can be they can wear you out. I'm just asking you to hang in there. Yes?
Did you do the last part again?
Sure. Let me just stop this recording really quick.